Hey friends, tonight, let's explore the quiet lessons hidden in history, the ones you won't find in textbooks, but in the rhythms of daily life long ago. Let's take it slow tonight. You probably wouldn't last a day. If you're still awake and still with me, maybe give that like button a gentle tap and subscribe if you'd like to come back for more sleepy wanderings. You open your eyes in the soft half-light of dawn as the first rays of sunlight kiss the pristine white marble atop the Acropolis. The Athenian morning air is cool, carrying the faint scent of wild herbs clinging to the steps that lead up to the Parthenon. Sparrows chatter on sunlit wooden shutters, their song a gentle chorus welcoming the new day. Below you, the city stirs awake. Terracotta roofs glow warm under the rising sun. Kites drift lazily overhead, and the soft click of pottery-laden carts echoes as they return from the nearby kilns. Each cobblestone underfoot presses gently against your sandals, a reminder that ancient Greeks designed their streets with care, weaving through the hills of Attica. You inhale deeply, tasting the crisp air tinged with a faint wisp of incense smoke from early morning offerings. Household priests have already lit charcoal braziers to burn frankincense and myrrh, part of the common morning ritual the Proemian believed to protect the city and bring peace to its citizens. But don't let those solemn rites distract you from the odd little details. Each dawn, local craftsmen scatter crushed oyster shells along the Acropolis steps to prevent slipping a folk trick seldom recorded in history books, but one that turns every footstep into a soft rustle like walking on fine sand. You make your way down the gentle slope into the winding lanes of Plaka, hearing the whisper of leather sandals on cool stone. The smell of warm, dark bread drifts from a small bakery, loaves baked in a wood-fired oven. Overnight, their crusts coated in a thin layer of ash to retain heat. The baker, wearing a coarse linen apron, tips the remaining dough aside and taps the wooden trough firmly, an old trick to deflate excess air bubbles and avoid hollow interiors known only to a few veteran bakers. The typical breakfast for ordinary Athenians is simple dark bread, aged goat cheese, and a bowl of honey-sweetened yogurt. You break off a piece of bread, crispy on the outside, tender within, and swipe it through a chunk of tangy cheese. The saltiness balances the honey's sweetness in your mouth. You wonder, did any Athenian ever mix crushed basil into their dough for extra aroma, as Byzantine farmers would centuries later? You inhale the yogurt's faint tang and creamy richness, spooning it slowly. This modest meal provided enough calories for a long day, but scholars still debate whether a carbohydrate-heavy diet left citizens short on energy, or if the protein and probiotics in cheese and yogurt made up the difference in nourishment. Stepping into a nearby square, you spot children tossing pottery lids in a playful game, a rough precursor to the Dionysian festival's tossing rituals. The clatter of clay striking clay creates a cheerful rhythm accompanied by the children's giggles. You can't help but wonder, could this innocent pastime have inspired the musical patterns of Dionysian celebrations? Sunlight filters through olive branches overhead, casting dappled patterns on stone walls as you pass the temple of Athena Nike. The shrine feels like a vigilant sentinel watching over craftsmen, philosophers, and school children alike. Some say that lightly brushing against the carved marble fragments underfoot brings good luck, a local custom that modern visitors still follow in hopes of a fortunate day. Before leaving the hilltop, you pause to run your fingers over a relief of a dove, the symbol of Athena, its cool stone smooth beneath your touch. For a moment, you listen to Athens' waking, distant hammering. At a stonemasonry workshop, morning greetings exchanged by carpenters, and the soft rush of the Aegean on the far-off docks of Piraeus. A quiet introduction to the day's tapestry, reminding you that ancient life was as rich and immediate as your own breath. You tread down a narrow side street as morning light spills between shuttered doorways, carrying the faint haze of charcoal smoke and the distant clatter of marketplace stalls preparing for business. The aroma of barley porridge simmers over small hearths, mingling with the scent of dried figs stacked in woven baskets. This humble porridge, or kratharaki, is the staple breakfast of Athenian commoners, simple barley grains boiled until soft, often sweetened with a drizzle of honey or a handful of chopped dates. This everyday porridge provides much-needed energy at dawn. Barley's high fiber and protein content fuel farm laborers and artisans alike, sustaining them through long hours of sweat and toil. You taste a spoonful, the grains yield tenderly beneath your spoon, their mild nuttiness rounded by the honey's floral sweetness. It's a comforting warmth enough to steady your senses for the morning ahead. But don't let that straightforward porridge fool you into thinking breakfasts lack surprises. Some households add a pinch of crushed laurel leaves, yes, the same bay laurel that lines the Acropolis slopes, to the boiling porridge. The result is a subtle piney note that enlivens each bite, and legend says wards off stomach cramps on colder days, a folk remedy rarely mentioned in classical cookbooks. As you stroll toward the agora, the city's central marketplace, you hear vendors untying ropes and displaying amphorae of olive oil, sacks of chickpeas, and trays of small fish anchovies, sardines, and the occasional prized mullet. The agora, a hub of commerce and conversation, hums with life. Geese cluck in pens, gray pigeons coo near temple steps, and the muffled thud of leather-soled sandals against limestone creates a soft, syncopated rhythm. The Athenian agora isn't just a market, it serves as the city's civic heart. Here, citizens buy supplies, hear decrees announced from the Bouleuterian, and exchange ideas. Debates on philosophy, politics, and poetry drift through the columns of nearby stores, blending commerce with civic discourse in a seamless tapestry of public life. You approach a stall where a potter shapes fresh clay into tiny kylikes, wine cups spinning mud on a foot-powered wheel. Each vessel bears thousands of fine grooves, guiding your fingertips across ridges that will one day cradle red wine or the barley-based kikion. The potter's skilled hands coax the clay into perfect symmetry, then carve a simple palmette motif around the rim, an emblem of local style. Once dried, these cups will be painted, fired, and readied for symposiums. Behind this scene lies a quirky workshop. Practice potters often bury small clay tokens in their wheel's pedestal, each stamped with a maker's mark. If a shard breaks off during firing, these hidden tokens identify which workshop produced the flawed piece, a rudimentary quality control system, and a spark of ancient corporate accountability. You continue along a sunlit colonnade where leather workers have laid out sandals in every size, from tiny child-sized soles to broad, sturdy caligae meant for hoplite soldiers. You kneel to examine a pair bound with supple straps and tiny bronze studs along the edges. The artisans dip the leather in olive oil to soften it before cutting and stitching, an essential step that makes sandals both comfortable and durable. Historians still debate whether military standard sandals wore out quickly in rough terrain, or thanks to their hobnailed soles, lasted longer than modern leather boots. Some argue the studs' traction suited rocky Greek paths, while others insist the thin soles offered almost no protection, forcing later Roman legionaries to march barefoot in protest until improved designs emerged. The light shifts as you pass under a broad archway into the Hephaestian precinct, ancient home of the god of craftsmanship. Here, metalworkers demonstrate their forges dance, glowing iron cooled in oil, hammered into shape and sharpened against whetstones. Sparks leap like fireflies as hammers strike red-hot metal, the clang, 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 reverberating softly against marble columns. You pause to feel the pulsing heat emanating from a cooled blade resting on a workbench. The metal's smooth surface is warm to the touch, echoing the sun's heat even in the morning breeze. In this place, artisans invoke Hephaestus's favor before labor begins pouring libations of wine at the forge hearth, believing the offering ensures clean burns and fewer accidents. Scholars debate whether these ritual offerings were genuine acts of faith or clever marketing to guarantee good work and customer trust. Inscriptions on dedicatory plaques sometimes list both deity and workshop name, suggesting a blend of piety and branding that resonates with modern questions of faith and commerce. Further along, you find a booth where cloth merchants display bolts of linen wool and an exotic material called mallow fiber, grown along coastal marshes. The fine linen glows like spun moonlight, while coarse wool feels almost furry, a perfect insulator for cooler months. You run your fingers across a swatch of linen and feel its cool, smooth weave, ideal for everyday hymations and chitons. A curious detail: some dyers use sea snails to produce purple dye, a rare and costly pigment reserved for magistrates and wealthy patrons. The snail's secretions yield a dye so vibrant it survives countless washes. Archaeologists have uncovered crushed shell heaps near ancient dye workshops, confirming the mollusk's central role and the noxious labor behind purple splendor. As the morning matures, the agora's traffic thickens. You catch snippets of conversation, an olive oil merchant haggling over grades, a philosopher extolling virtue ethics to a small crowd, and a huckster shouting the merits of his oversized goose eggs. The air carries layers of aroma-tangy garum from fishmongers' sweet incense from temple offerings, and the earthy scent of fresh clay. Each scent weaves into a sensory map of the agora, a living, breathing space that shaped Athenian identity. You pause beside a fountain where women fill water jars carved from soft limestone. The water channeled from the Mount Hymettus springs via aqueduct pours steadily into the basin. You dip a jar's rim and taste the cool, mineral-rich liquid, a refreshing counterpoint to the day's warmth and a testament to the city's engineering genius. Yet some modern engineers question whether these early aqueducts built with porous stone channels lost too much water to seepage and inefficiency weighed against architectural splendor. Did the lost water justify the marvel, or did Athens pay too high a price for its renowned water supply? With a final sip, you shoulder your jar and step back onto the sun-warmed paving stones. The agora's orchestra of life continues around you, wood carvers shaping figurines, stalls sizzling olives and figs, and philosophers gesturing softly as they explore the heart of existence. You pause to absorb the mosaic of sounds, scents, and motions, feeling connected to the ancient pulse of this storied marketplace. Each breath, each step, each whispered trade reminds you that in Athens, commerce, conversation, and community were inseparable, echoing each other in a timeless dance of civilization. You slip behind the velvet curtain of the open-air theater just as the sun reaches its zenith, the heat shimmering off the stone seats and gilded statues above. The air is alive with the soft scrape of wooden masks being adjusted, the click of sandals on the worn stage, and the low murmur of actors reciting lines under their breath. This is the rehearsal for the next tragedy, a sacred art form that shaped Athenian identity and still echoes through the centuries. A common historical fact: Greek theater emerged in the 6th century BCE during religious festivals, honoring Dionysus, blending choral hymns with improvised drama. By classical Athens playwrights like Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, had elevated theater into a sophisticated art using a chorus to comment on the action and intensify its emotional impact. Citizens gathered here not just for entertainment, but for civic reflection. You settle on a sun-warmed stone bench near the front of the orchestra where faint chalk lines still mark the chorus's dance path. Heat radiates through your tunic as a dozen chorus members practice synchronized steps, chanting a mournful stanza, O Charis T Piesume, O hands, what shall we do? Their voices rise and fall in measured cadence, each syllable a drop in a solemn river of sound. But don't let the grandeur obscure the odd behind-the-scenes details beneath their tragic masks. Actors insert small sprigs of mint or pennyroyal between mask and skin to ease the itch of plaster and catch stray perspiration. As each mask tilts, a subtle herbal scent drifts into the audience, cutting through the haze of incense smoke from the altar. To your left, a young actor rehearses the lines of his tragic hero. Why, O city, must I bear this curse? He adjusts his hymation and repeats the line, his voice quivering with genuine emotion. Nearby, the stage manager, wooden stylus in hand, taps the stone floor to mark pauses, ensuring the pacing matches the chorus's rhythm. Too slow, and the audience's attention might wander. Too fast, and the tragic weight evaporates. A quirky rehearsal habit emerges. Actors rub wine lees, the sediment left from the previous night's symposium, onto their boots. This sticky residue improves traction on the smooth stone stage, preventing dangerous slips during intense moments of drama. Archaeological digs and theater workshops have uncovered shards of boot soles stained dark purple, confirming this improvised trick. The playwright, often revered as a godlike figure, stands to one side, notebook in hand. He murmurs suggestions, adjusting a single word here, a pause there. His assistant scrawls notes on a wax tablet, add sticomythia at line 42, or raise chorus volume at ghost. You realize that even masterpieces undergo careful polishing, challenging the myth of divine inspiration and revealing the painstaking craft behind every verse. As rehearsal continues, musicians tune their aulos pipes, double-reeded instruments, whose plaintive sound evokes both celebration and sorrow. One pipe squeaks under its player's breath, prompting suppressed smiles among the chorus. A stagehand slips forward, exchanging reeds until the tuning is just right. The harmony between voice and pipe underpins every moment of tension on this stage. Scholars still debate whether ancient audiences fully appreciated these technical intricacies or responded purely to the narrative's emotional current. Some argue that literate citizens followed scripts and recognized revisions, while others suggest that most Athenians attended for spectacle and communal engagement rather than textual nuance. The sun begins its descent, casting long shadows across the proscenium. You feel the stones cool, signaling the approach of evening performances. A lead actor emerges wearing the mask of an elder king, his voice deep and resonant. With a single gesture, he demonstrates how mask and movement must align, chin-raised shoulders, squared feet, planted firmly. The mask's painted eyes stare into the distance, its fixed expression amplifying every word into mythic proclamation. A footnote in theater lore, some actors use tiny dowels to angle masks, slightly changing a character's expression mid-scene without swapping masks. The practice required deft manual work behind the back reserved for only the most skilled artists. Nearby, the chorus practices its final exit, each member moving in perfect unison to the soft thud of sandals on stone. The simple choreography, 2 steps forward a turn, 2 steps back, shapes the audience's focus, guiding their gaze from one tragic tableau to the next. You close your eyes, letting their chant wash over you, Oxene poth eches. Stranger, what longing grips you? The repetition becomes a mantra pulling you deeper into the performance's undercurrents of fate and choice. As you open your eyes, the playwright offers the lead actor a small cup of water flavored with crushed mint and honey, both a prop and a throat soother. Actors sip this mixture between takes, blending practicality with ritual. The stagehand waits for a nod before removing the cup, preserving continuity for the audience's eye. The theater's acoustics catch the distant laughter of children from the agora, merging with the rehearsal's solemnity. Every sound from off-stage wings to the rustle of spectators' togas becomes part of the living tapestry of performance. A final academic question lingers. Did Athenian tragedy serve primarily as moral instruction, urging citizens to ponder hubris and divine justice, or as elaborate entertainment that reaffirmed social norms through shared catharsis? Modern critics remain divided, suggesting that tragedy's power lay in its ability to do both at once. As the chorus completes its exit, you rise and step onto the stage, feeling the cool stone beneath your sandals. Each footstep echoes in the empty theater, a reminder that this sacred space thrives on the delicate interplay of voice movement and silence. The setting sun casts a warm glow across the marble facades, hinting at the magic that tonight's performance will unleash. You pause at center stage, letting the cooling air embrace you. What was once merely stone and light now stands ready under the devotion of actors and chorus to become a living vessel of story, emotion, and timeless questions. Would you dare to step beyond the mask and speak ancient words that still tremble in the space between actor and audience? You slip behind the vine-shaded canopy of the pottery quarter, just as the midday sun filters through overhead leaves, casting dappled light across rows of spinning wheels and drying wares. The air is warm and scented, with wet earth mingling with the faint smokiness of nearby kilns. Around you, potters crouch at low benches, their hands dancing over malleable clay as foot-powered pedals keep the wheel turning. By the 5th century, BCE Athenian workshops had mastered the potter's wheel, producing both everyday vessels and exquisite ceremonial wares. Amphorae carried olive oil and wine across the Mediterranean. Craters mixed water and wine at symposiums, and small lekythoi held perfumed oils for funerary rites. Every piece bore the potter's signature, an early form of branding marking quality and origin. You crouch beside a master potter molding an amphora's shoulder, feeling the clay's cool slipperiness beneath your fingertips. as he guides its curves into perfect symmetry. The wheel spins in a soft, hypnotic whir clay wheel, hand each rotation measured in a gentle lullaby. Nearby, a small pile of broken potsherds test fragments used to gauge clay consistency ensures uniformity across dozens of vessels. But the craft isn't purely mechanical. A quirky workshop ritual involves mixing goat hair into the clay. As a purity test, stray hairs that poke through a forming piece signal impurities, prompting potters to rewash and rehydrate their clay until each vessel's surface is flawless. An apprentice trims a kylix's foot with a wooden knife, producing delicate spirals of clay that tumble onto the floor. The air carries the resinous scent of pine tar used to seal water jars and the warm, musty aroma of raw clay. On racks overhead, half-dried oinochoai rest on straw mats to slow evaporation and prevent cracking. Tiny straw impressions on their matte surfaces are tactile reminders of this gentle curing process. Across the aisle, the black gloss sheen of a just-fired amphora catches the light. Potters ladle water over its hot surface and rub it with olive oil. The oil seeps into micro fissures, locking in a deep shine that glimmers bronze in shifting light. Such finishes once dazzled Athenian eyes at feasts and processions. Inscriptions and painted scenes connect craft to culture. A large crater bears a black figure symposium tableau, wine cups, raised togas, draped immortalizing everyday rituals in clay. Debates among scholars question whether these mythic scenes served as moral instruction or simply as social entertainment. Perhaps they did both, reflecting Athens' complex identity. Nearby, an apprentice sieves slip liquid clay through fine silk, creating the pale gray medium artists would pigment with iron oxide for rich red details. Too thin and brush strokes would bleed. Too thick and they'd crack. The precision demands steady hands and keen eyes. Under the stoop of a pottery stall, shards of crushed shell confirm another long-forgotten trick artisans added ground sea snail shells to clay as an abrasive to polish vessels. Tiny microscopic edges buffed fibers at the cost of minute surface frays, leaving pots gleaming under the sun. Kilns shaped this art's destiny. Beehive-shaped chambers fueled by olive wood reached uneven temperatures. One slight draft shift could turn perfection into shards. Historians argue whether such risks drove potters to form secretive cooperatives or to guard their methods jealously as trade secrets. Before you depart, you lift a large hydria, destined to carry water from city springs, and run your palm beneath its lip, feeling the smooth rim shaped by years of devoted hands. Clay dust marks your fingertips as you step back onto the sunlit avenue, carrying with you the echoes of wheel kiln and the timeless interplay of earth and fire. Would you dare to work this wheel day after day, molding humble dirt into vessels that carried wine, water, and the stories of an entire civilization? You leave the hush of the open-air theater behind and make your way southwest to the shadowed valley, where the Agog's training grounds lie, the air growing cooler beneath groves of pines and olive trees. Spartan youths rise long before dawn, long before the rest of Greece, and gather barefoot on the dewy grass. Each footstep presses cool moisture into their souls, their breath forming gentle puffs that drift upward like ghostly banners. By age 7, Spartan boys entered the agoge, the state-run education and training system. Under the watchful eyes of pedagogoi guardians, they lived in communal barracks, learned combat skills, endured physical trials, and mastered survival techniques. This rigorous regimen forged unwavering loyalty to Sparta and produced the formidable hoplites who defended the Peloponnese. You step onto the field feeling the grass whisper beneath your feet. A sergeant hardened by decades of campaigns calls out the morning drill, sprint up the gentle incline, tumble into a roll, then sprint back down. The trainees obey without hesitation, their sandals forgotten, as they push through the blades of grass. You join them for one lap, tasting the metallic tang of adrenaline as your lungs burn and your legs protest. But their steel resolve conceals some curious survival hacks. To cultivate cunning as well as courage, boys were encouraged to steal small items, cheese, for example, from the city's stockpiles at night. If caught, they were punished not for theft, but for clumsiness, teaching stealth and resourcefulness under the guise of discipline and humility. After the sprint, the trainees circle a low stone altar for a brief ritual. Each climbs onto its cool surface, kisses the marble's smooth edge, and utters a vow. Sparta, for you I endure. The stone's chill seeps through their skin, anchoring them in the gravity of their oath. Scorch marks from past offerings of barley porridge, symbolic fuel for body, and will mar the altar's top. Next comes spear practice. You grip a wooden dory, its shaft carved from sturdy olive wood, sanded to a satin finish. A trainer demonstrates the proper grip, one hand near the butt, the other midway elbows, relaxed. You mimic his posture and thrust. The thunk as the point bites into the wooden target sends vibrations up your arm, a satisfying echo against your palm. To toughen their hands, some trainees wrap leather thongs around the shaft at their grip, reducing blisters during repetitive throws. The stained thongs carry an earthy tang of sweat and sun-baked leather, clinging to weapon and wielder alike. The next exercise tests endurance. You and the others form lines to carry heavy logs, olive trunks stripped of bark, over a marked course. Each step is a negotiation between determination and exhaustion. The soft rustle of grass and the pine wind form a muted soundtrack to your effort. Yet these aren't just any logs. Trainers select battle logs from felled olive trees, once used for A4 inscriptions, spiritual fragments of civic memory. Carrying these sacred trunks deepens the trainee's connection to Sparta's ancestral wisdom, a living link between past and future defenders. After the log carry, you wade into a stone plunge basin fed by mountain spring water, its chill biting like shards of ice. The shock draws a sharp intake of breath and leaves cheeks flushed. In those frozen moments, you force yourself to relax, letting the water's icy pressure chase away fatigue and sharpen your senses. Spartans believed that alternating exertion with cold immersion tempered both body and mind. Pliny the Elder later praised cold water treatments as cures for lethargy and melancholy, echoing practices Spartan youths embraced millennia earlier. Still, modern scholars debate whether such harsh regimens bred resilience or risked hypothermia. Was the line between toughness and danger ever truly clear? Clambering from the plunge, you join a circle for combat drills. Each trainee dons a simple leather breastplate and hefts a wooden hoplite shield, painted sky blue to mirror the Spartan banner. You advance in unison, shield brace left foot, leading then right, practicing the phalanx. Push a collective shoving technique meant to break enemy lines. The shields thrum against each other, a muffled percussion that vibrates through your arms and shoulders, a subtle innovation. Some shields bear hidden metal studs behind the rim reinforcements that lessen the chance of cracking under a blade. These plain utilitarian studs reflect Sparta's pragmatism. Victory mattered more than decoration, and every warrior carried both protection and advantage. As the sun dips low, training shifts to stealth and tracking. You follow the sergeant into a rocky grove where dry leaves crackle underfoot. The mission, read the trail left by hidden instructors. You crouch, low breath, quiet, spotting broken twigs and flattened foliage. Each step is measured the soft thud of your knee against earth, a testament to Spartan discipline in movement. Survival lore taught trainees to carry small copper mirrors, polished plates, used not only for grooming, but for signaling across hillsides and checking brush for ambushes. These mirrors doubled as silent communication tools, catching stray sunlight to flash prearranged messages. As dusk falls, the final exercise begins in near darkness, silent approach. You and a small squad move by a dim torchlight toward a distant hut. Any stumble or whisper breaks the drill, and you must start over. Each creak of leather and shift of sandal echoes in the hush until taciturn focus becomes second nature. At last, you reach the target, extinguish your torch, and signal success. The victory hush feels like a shared heartbeat, binding you to your comrades in solidarity born of discipline and effort. The sergeant calls everyone together for a final rite, a communal cup of Posca vinegar, diluted with water and flavored with barley. You sip the tangy brew at sharpness, cutting through the day's exertion and reminding you that Spartan warriors valued sustenance over luxury, fueling strength with simplicity. In the fading light, you stand before the training ground's low stone wall, tracing its weathered surface. You remember the morning's tests, speed, strength, endurance, stealth, and unity. Each trial shaping body and mind in equal measure, forging a warrior caste whose name still echoes through history. A final question drifts into your thoughts. Did the Agag cultivate unparalleled martial excellence at the cost of creativity and personal freedom? Or did it instill a model of civic commitment that strengthened social bonds and transcended individual ambition? Perhaps the answer lies in the quiet aftermath of each day's discipline, whispered on the cooling air and etched in the hearts of those who endured. Would you dare to rise before dawn, embrace the pain, and dedicate your life to Sparta's unyielding demands? Could you trade comfort for conquest of self? You slip behind the velvet curtain of the open-air theater. Just as the sun reaches its zenith, the heat shimmering off the stone seating and gilded statues above. The air is alive with the soft scrape of wooden masks being adjusted, the click of sandals on the worn stage, and the low murmur of actors reciting lines under their breath. This is rehearsal for the next tragedy, performance, and art form that shaped Athenian identity and echoes through centuries. A common historical fact, Greek theater emerged in the 6th century BCE during religious festivals honoring Dionysus, blending choral hymns with improvised drama. By classical Athens playwrights like Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides had elevated theater into a sophisticated art, using a chorus to comment on the action and intensify its emotional impact. Citizens gathered here not only for entertainment, but also for civic reflection. You settle on a sun-warmed marble bench near the front of the orchestra, where faint chalk lines still mark the chorus's dance path. The stone's heat presses through your tunic as a chorus of nearly a dozen performers practices synchronized steps, chanting a mournful stanza, O Heres, ti piesomen. O hands, what shall we do? Their voices rise and fall in measured cadence, each syllable a drop in a solemn river of sound. But don't let the grandeur obscure the odd behind-the-scenes details beneath the plaster masks. Actors slip small sprigs of mint or pennyroyal between mask and skin to ease the itch and catch stray perspiration. When the masks tilt, a subtle herbal fragrance drifts into the audience, freshening the smoke-hazed air. To your left, a young actor tests his lines in the role of the tragic hero. Why, oh city, must I bear this curse? He adjusts his hymation and repeats the line, his voice quivering with genuine emotion. Nearby, the stage manager, wooden stylus in hand, taps the stone floor to mark pauses, ensuring the actor's pacing matches the chorus's rhythm. Timing is everything too slow, and the audience's attention wanders. Too fast, and the tragic weight evaporates. A quirky rehearsal hack emerges. Actors rub wine leaves the sediment left after symposia on their boot soles. The sticky residue improves traction on smooth stone, preventing dangerous slips during intense scenes. Fragments of purple-stained leather recovered from theater workshops confirm this improvised solution. The playwright, often revered like a god, stands off to one side, notebook in hand. He murmurs suggestions, adjusting a single word here, a pause there. His assistant records notes on a wax tablet, add steichomythia at line 42, or raise chorus volume at ghost. Even masterpieces underwent careful polishing, revealing the painstaking craft behind every verse. Musicians now tune their alloy double-reed pipes, whose plaintive sound evokes both celebration and sorrow. One pipe squeaks under the musician's breath, drawing suppressed smiles from the chorus. A stagehand slips forward to exchange reeds until the tuning is just right. The harmony between voice and pipe underpins every charged moment on this stage. Scholars still debate whether ancient audiences fully appreciated these technical intricacies or responded mainly to the narrative's emotional current. Some argue literate citizens read scripts and recognized revisions, while others believe most Athenians attended for spectacle and communal engagement, rather than textual nuance. The sun begins its descent, casting long shadows across the proscenium. A lead actor emerges, wearing the mask of an elder king, his voice deep and resonant. With a single gesture, he shows how mask and body must align, chin raised, shoulders, squared feet, planted firmly. The mask's fixed eyes stare into the distance, its painted expression magnifying every spoken word. A footnote in theater lore, some actors use tiny dowels to angle their masks, tipping them down or sideways, so a character's expression could subtly shift mid-scene without swapping masks. The trick required deft hands and was reserved for the most skilled performers. The chorus now practices its final exit, each member moving in perfect unison to the soft thud of sandals on stone. The choreography, 2 steps forward, a turn, 2 steps back, guides the audience's gaze from one tragic tableau to the next. You close your eyes, letting their chant wash over you. O xene poth eches. Stranger, what longing grips you? The repetition becomes a mantra, pulling you deeper into the drama's currents of fate and choice. Opening your eyes, the playwright hands the lead actor a small cup of water flavored with crushed mint and honey, an on-stage prop that also soothes the throat. Actors sip the mixture between takes, blending practicality with ritual. The stagehand waits for a nod before removing the cup, preserving continuity for the audience. Outside, distant children's laughter from the agora mingles with the rehearsals, solemnity. Every sound from off-stage wings to the rustle of spectators' togas becomes part of the theater's living tapestry. A final academic question drifts in your mind. Did Athenian tragedy serve primarily as moral instruction, urging citizens to contemplate hubris and divine justice, or as an elaborate entertainment reinforcing social norms through shared catharsis? Critics remain divided. Tragedy's power likely lay in its ability to do both. As the chorus completes its exit, you rise and step onto the empty stage, feeling the cool stone beneath your sandals. Each step echoes softly, reminding you that this sacred space transforms into a living vessel of story, emotion, and timeless inquiry. Would you dare to step beyond the mask to speak ancient words that still tremble in the silence between actor and audience? You slip through the low wooden door of the Parthenon's inner courtyard just as the sun dips toward the western hills, the clatter of sandals on stone giving way to hushed murmurs and soft laughter. Tonight is symposium night, an Athenian tradition of intellectual feasting by torchlight. The air smells of spiced wine and roasting nuts mingling with the gentle hiss of oil lamps flickering along painted stucco walls. A common historical fact, the symposium, literally drinking together, was a ritualized gathering of male citizens, usually elites, who reclined on low couches called cleani around a central table. They sipped wine mixed with water in a crater to Kylix procession, conversed on philosophy, recited poetry, and played refined games like katabos, flicking dregs at targets to test skill and luck. You recline on soft cushions draped in crimson cloth, letting the subtle spring in the couch's wicker frame press into your back. The host pours the first round of wine from a bronze crater into your Kylix, mixing 2 parts water to 1 part wine. Stronger blends were frowned upon as reckless. You lift the cup, feeling its cool ceramic rim brush your lips, and inhale the wine's redolent aroma, ripe grape undercurrents sweetened with a hint of pine resin from the amphora sealants. But don't mistake this refined scene for mere indulgence. A quirky courtesy. Evolved cups were dipped briefly in cold water before chilling the wine and creating a soft hiss as steam lifted an ASMR moment that heightened anticipation. Apprentices stood by with shallow bowls of water and rose or mint petals sprinkling both into the air to cool and scent the gathering as each cup was filled. As torchlight flickers across sculpted busts of poets and heroes lining the walls, conversation opens with a recitation of Homeric lines. A young orator rises voice even and calm to declaim Achilles' lament in the Iliad. He begins, "Sing, O Muse, of the wrath of Achilles." Each word trembles in the warm air, drawing you into the sorrow and rage of epic grief. You feel the syllables resonate in your chest like a distant drum stirring empathy you didn't know you could carry. Between recitations, the host introduces a glass tessera, an inscribed token, into the crater, signaling a shift from poetry to debate. Dinner servants step lightly, offering small plates of salted figs, roasted chickpeas, and cubes of dense goat cheese drizzled with thyme honey. You bite into a fig, its warm flesh yields velvet sweetness, the tiny seeds crackling gently under your molars. You slick honey-glazed cheese across your palate, the herb's resinous edge balancing the fruit sugar. Symposiums served as more than sensory delight. They were crucibles of political and philosophical discourse. A guest proposes today's question: does strict moderation elevate character, or does passion forge greatness? Torches sway as philosophers lean forward to argue. One cites Socrates' ideal of the temperate life moderate desires as the path to virtue. Another counters with the heroism of excess Achilles after all transcended mortality through fiery rage. A modern scholarly debate echoes in your mind, did Greek ethics privilege self-control as civic stability? Or did they romanticize passionate extremes as sources of cultural advancement? Textual fragments show both stoic caution and romantic valor, coexisting an enduring tension in intellectual history. You set down your kylix and join a game of kotabos, holding the cup by its handles and flicking the last drops of wine at a suspended disc. The wine arcs in a delicate parabola, landing with a soft plunk and sending the disc spinning in slow joy. The muted applause of onlookers ripples through the courtyard, merging with the gentle clink of kylixes being refilled. An unexpected detail, some hosts added honey to the wine dregs for kotabos, believing the pooled sweetness improved the flick's viscosity and precision, a playful hack that blurred the lines between game and gastronomic experiment. Archaeologists have found residue of honey wine mixtures in drinking cups carved for kotabos, confirming this delicious twist. As conversation deepens, a guest pours a final bowl of kikion, a thick barley and water blend seasoned with mint and cheese to transition toward closure. You sip the milky beverage, its grainy texture calming the tongue after tart wine, and feel a gentle warmth seep into your belly. The kikion's soothing effect signaled the symposium's end, allowing minds to settle before finding beds in nearby guest quarters. The torches dim one by one, their flames guttering in the night breeze. You rise, stretching limbs dulled by long hours of reclining, and run a finger along the engraved edge of your kylix, tracing the artisan's subtle flourish. A lone flute player emerges to play an encore, soft descending notes that drift through the still courtyard like a lullaby. Each tone quivers briefly before fading, leaving silence imbued with afterglow. As you step into the cool night, the scent of pine and wine lingers in your hair. The symposium has woven intellect, taste, and ritual into a seamless tapestry. You carry away questions unasked and arguments unresolved, their echoes ringing like distant bells in your mind. Would you dare to embrace the rigors of moderation and heated discourse, or would you prefer the unbridled passion of untempered wine and unspoken desires? You descend the worn stone steps from the city's heart toward the bustling harbor of Piraeus, where the tang of salt and oak smoke mingles in the early morning air. Ships of every size bob gently at their moorings, their wooden hulls creaking like low-sung sea shanties. Fishermen tend their nets on one quay. On another, cargo handlers load amphorae of olive oil, dried figs, and pressed wine onto broad-beamed merchant vessels bound for distant ports. By the 5th century BCE, Piraeus served as Athens' primary naval and commercial port, linked to the city by the long walls. Its 3 natural harbors, Kantharos, Zea, and Munichia, accommodated hundreds of ships fueling Athens' grain imports from the Black Sea timber from Macedon and precious metals from Euboea. Without this maritime network, the city's burgeoning population could not have thrived. You step onto a sturdy deck, the wood groaning under your sandals, and feel the ship's hull sway beneath your feet. Sailors haul in lines with practiced ease, and their hands rope-thick with calluses from years of hauling canvas and hemp. You follow a row of amphorae, each stamped with a meander border, enclosing a stylized owl lined up for loading. These jars will carry olive oil as tribute to Smyrna, then return with saffron-laced cloth from Persia. But don't mistake this seasoned port for mere trade. A hidden hack among merchants involved hollowing out one in every 20 amphora handles to stash small coins. During foreign inspections, traders would claim these jars were damaged and set them aside, later recovering the coins once back at sea. Archaeologists diving wreck sites off Samos have recovered handles with concealed cavities, evidence of Aegean entrepreneurs' creativity. You wander past a small brigantine whose foredeck bristles with nets hung to dry. A fisherman squeezes a handful of silvery sardines, the fish slipping through his fingers like slippery jewels, before tipping them into woven baskets lined with pine needles used to keep the catch fresh and deter worms. The pine scent mingles with brine, creating an olfactory snapshot of the sea itself. Nearby, a sleek merchant galley readies its two oarsmen's benches. You run a hand along the polished oarlock, feeling its worn smoothness, where countless strokes have churned the water. Each oar shaft bears hand-carved notches, marking every league traveled on official voyages, an informal logbook kept by vigilant rowers. These notches, historians debate, serve both practical navigation and crew pride. Each score a silent testament to endurance. The tide carries you toward a cluster of crew quarters built from stacked planks and tarred canvas. You slip inside, where hammocks sway gently in the breeze, doubling as bedding and cargo nets. A lone sailor stirs, blinking against the sudden light, and slides a rope aside to reveal a hidden alcove beneath the deck. There, stacked low against the hull, lie barrels of salted pork packed in straw, both food reserve and counterweight, to stabilize the vessel in rough seas. A more unusual practice lurked in these holdways. Captains sometimes added broken amphora fragments as ballast mixed with sand. Beyond improving trim, the shards created a muffled drumming noise when the ship passed over reefs, an audible signal to steer clear of hidden shoals. This sonar-like trick, passed down through generations of Greek mariners, earned Piraeus' sailors a reputation for uncanny reef avoidance skills. Stepping back onto the wharf, you witness a busy exchange of coin and cargo. A merchant in a white himation, embroidered with purple threads, marking his status, haggles over a load of Attic wine destined for Cyrene. The dockmaster examines the amphora seals, nods, and jingles a handful of bronze obols into the merchant's palm with a discreet wink. Custom officials often accepted small accelerator fees to speed inspections, a practice so widespread that papyrus records chide future scribes to reduce bribery, lest the harbor's reputation suffer. You follow the merchant across the quay to a small loft where stevedores tally goods on wax tablets. They scratch figures with iron styli, 100 amphorae olive oil, 40 amphorae wine, 2,000 kilon of grain, each number a critical entry in Athens' food security ledger. Grain imports from the Black Sea, funneled through Piraeus, sustained the city's poorest citizens under the grain dole. Without these shipments, famine and civil unrest would loom large. Modern economists debate whether Athens' reliance on imported grain fostered economic interdependence that strengthened its empire or created vulnerabilities ripe for blockade by rival powers. The Spartan siege of Athens during the Peloponnesian War, which severed overland supply, underscores how critical sea lanes and Piraeus' resilience could determine a city's fate. You ascend a gangplank onto a sturdy merchantman preparing for departure. The Captain Bronzed and sun-creased wraps a weathered trumpet carved from wood to signal readiness. Sailors hoist the mainsail, a square linen expanse patched with triangular scraps, while apprentices secure spare canvas bundles nearby. You help coil a line, its fibers frayed from salt and sun, feeling the gentle tension of each wrap. The ship pulls away from dock, pivoting on a single oar lashed athwart as a makeshift tiller. You watch Piraeus recede. The stone lighthouse at Cantharos glints in the fading light. Fish processing sheds edge the shoreline, and the distant long walls rise toward Athens. As you glide past sea caves, you glimpse hidden smugglers' coves, once used to slip contraband into the city. Olive oil diverted to Mytilene, or raw hides shipped illicitly to Etruria. At last, the oar's rhythmic dip and lift propel you into the open water. Seabirds wheel overhead, their cries a chorus to the hull's steady creak. You breathe in the salt-rich breeze, savoring the swell's gentle motion beneath your feet. A reminder that Athens' greatness rode these waves, not just rested on marble columns. Would you trade the firm stone streets for uncertain sea routes, trusting lantern signals, secret ballast, and the favor of Poseidon to guide you home? You slip through a narrow archway at the edge of the city into a shaded domus, where hushed murmurs and the scent of fresh laundry greet you like a secret. This is the household of a well-to-do Athenian, and within these walls, the invisible backbone of Greek society, its slaves moves with silent efficiency. Their routines, a carefully choreographed dance of service and subservience. By classical times, slaves made up roughly a third of Athens' population, performing tasks from skilled craftsmanship and tutoring to domestic service and hard labor in the silver mines of Laurium. Though they lacked legal personhood, their work underpinned Athenian wealth and leisure, enabling citizens to devote themselves to politics, philosophy, and the arts. You step into the atrium on soft slippers and pause at the Lanai water station, where a row of clay jars cools on stone pedestals. A young female slave lifts an oinocho, an olive oil-sealed pitcher, from its ledge, tilts it gently, and fills a shallow bowl with fragrant water for her master's morning wash. The liquid pools with a muted clink, and she carries it inside with the dignity of ritual head, bowed but back straight. But don't let the graceful movement fool you. Graffiti in hidden quarters reveals that some slaves fashion tiny rings from bent bronze hairpins and slip them onto their middle fingers beneath their tunics. At day's end, these covert hooks nabbed small scraps from cooking pots, just enough to stave off hunger, but enough to nourish fragile hope. Excavations of abandoned slave quarters have uncovered clusters of such pin rings, testament to these secret survival tactics. In the kitchen beyond, half a dozen slaves work over low hearths, their silhouettes flickering in smoky torchlight. One stirs a bubbling pot of barley porridge, simmered with lentils and seasoned with coriander, while another rolls dough into flatbreads and dusts them with sesame seeds before laying them on hot stones. The scent of grain and spice hangs heavy, the hearth's warmth pressing gently against your skin. Many Athenian households employed specialist cook slaves, sometimes foreigners trained under master chefs, to concoct elaborate dishes for symposia and special occasions. Yet a favored cook's security was fleeting. A single misstep could see him sold off to the grueling quarries of Laurium, where life expectancy was perilously low. Nearby, a male slave in a simple linen tunic polishes bronze oil lamps with a rag soaked in olive oil and ashlie coaxing a gentle gleam from tarnished metal. He inspects each wick trimming stray fibers to ensure a clean burn. The rhythmic swish of cloth against metal is a soft ASMR-like whisper in the dusky room. Scholars debate whether skilled artisan slaves enjoyed a modicum of respect and autonomy, training apprentices and passing on specialized knowledge, or whether any status was illusory, masked by the constant threat of sale or punishment. Evidence of informal guild-like groups among artisan slaves suggests both cooperation and muted assertions of collective identity. Passing through a curtained doorway, you enter the study, where a tutor slave sits with a young boy guiding his stylus across a wax tablet. The scratch of stylus on wax punctuates the hush as the boy copies a line of Homeric verse wine, a medicine for sorrow, but not for every man. The slave pronounces each word carefully, imparting both literacy and moral lessons. Yet, household records hint that some tutors used mnemonic tricks, tapping the boy's wrist with a feather to mark metrical accents, blurring the line between instruction and subtle discipline. Education under slavery thus combined care with control. In the courtyard, 5 slaves gather around a trough, washing and wringing laundry. They rub tunics against ridged stones, water running through grooves into a drain. The murmur of water and the soft slap of wet cloth create an ASMR lullaby that underscores their labor. Laundry slaves sometimes added poppy petal tea to the rinse water, its mild sedative properties soothing inflamed skin and frayed nerves after long hours of scrubbing. Pollen residue found on unearthed stone slabs confirms this folk remedy, hinting at shared rituals that eased drudgery. As the sun climbs, you join the queue at the front gate, each slave carrying goods for the day's market run. Baskets of eggs, bundles of leeks, pots of honey, a slave driver's staff tapping a slow rhythm on the flagstones marshals them toward the agora. The clatter of baskets and muted instructions form a gentle percussion, a steady beat to which they march. And yet, a deeper question looms: did serving openly in the civic marketplace offer slaves any form of public engagement? Or did it reinforce their invisibility, demanding obedience, while denying personhood? Inscriptions on some market stalls record evening donations of unsold goods by the goodwill of my slave, hinting at small acts of generosity, overshadowed by ownership. As you watch the column of slaves file past you, sense the paradox: they stand at the threshold of public life, yet remain unseen actors on the city stage, essential to Athens' vibrancy, yet barred from its freedoms. Each footstep, every whispered command, every hidden ring speaks to lives lived on the margins, indispensable yet unheard. Would you dare step into their worn sandals, balancing duty and dignity beneath the weight of another's name? You slip through a narrow archway at the edge of the city into the shaded sanctuary of the Temple of Athena Nike, just as mid-morning light filters through the surrounding olive groves. The air is cool and still carrying the faint aroma of burning frankincense from a nearby brazier. Here, Athenians pause between civic duties and market errands to honor their patron goddess, with quiet offerings embedding personal hopes into stone sent. By classical tradition, public temple offerings formed the backbone of Greek worship. Citizens deposited first fruits, barley cakes, olive branches, small loaves onto stone altars or into bronze bowls, believing that visible gifts would secure divine favor in matters of war health and civic well-being. At pan-Hellenic festivals, lavish dedications marked communal celebration, but daily life in Athens relied on these modest private rites. You approach a low altar carved with the relief of Nike's winged figure, her outstretched wings ready for flight. A priest, his white hymation edged in purple stands, ready with shallow bronze fire-eye libation bowls. You lift a small clay jug of olive oil, its surface warm from the sun, and pour a thin stream into the phial. The oil pools with a soft golden shimmer spreading outward in concentric rings before seeping into carved channels that lead toward the temple's foundation. Each ripple seems to echo a silent prayer for victory, whether in battle, athletic contest, or daily trial. Yet beneath the solemnity lies a hidden quirk. Some worshippers crushed a single bay leaf into their oil, invoking Apollo's gift of prophetic clarity alongside Athena's martial favor. Excavations near the Acropolis have uncovered shards of bay leaf in drainage trenches below altars, tiny lunar-shaped tokens amplifying each libation's symbolic power. You step aside as a young hoplite returns from training and places a sheaf of barley stalks bound with crimson wool at the altar's base. The red wool honors both martial service and Demeter's harvest festival, reminding you that Athenians embraced agricultural and military identities in tandem. You inhale the sweet, dry scent of the stalk's earth and promise intertwined before the breeze carries it away. Nearby, a group of women spreads out woven mats before a secondary altar, dedicated to Hestia, goddess of hearth and home. They arrange small votive loaves round lightly salted, scored with a dove's emblem, into neat rows. The dove symbolizes Hestia's guardianship and the peaceful domestic sphere she protects. Each loaf bears a maker's fingerprint, imprinting household identity onto sacred bread. Modern scholars debate these domestic offerings. Were they sincere acts of devotion, reinforcing communal bonds, or subtle advertisements of family prosperity and piety? Some inscriptions read like contracts. If Hestia spares my hearth, I dedicate this loaf, hinting at a quasi-legal understanding between mortal and divine. As you cross the marble floor, your footsteps echo beneath ionic columns. Torchlighter slaves trim wicks and hanging lamps, their soft hisses punctuating the hush. You pause to watch a child anoint a terracotta figurine of Athena with perfumed oil lavender and rose petals steeped in olive oil. The floral aroma mingles with resinous incense, forming an olfactory tapestry that settles worshippers into calm focus. A playful footnote from theater crowd graffiti reveals that some devotees, believing strong scents awakened the gods, mixed crushed thyme into their incense. Thyme's sharp bite, combined with sweeter aromas, left herbal heat lingering in the temple's corners. Ahead, you glimpse a vase brimming with votive miniature weapons, tiny bronze spears, shields, helmets offered by soldiers before campaigns in the Peloponnese. Each tiny armament embodies a prayer for battlefield protection and safe return. The bronzes glint in torchlight like trapped fireflies. You run your finger along a helmet's ridge, sensing both its cold precision and the fervent hope it represents. Scholars still argue, did these weapon votives reflect Spartan-style militarism infiltrating Athenian temples, or did they remain personal talismans, each soldier's plea a humble communal act? Some believe the sheer number of arms symbolized civic acceptance of perpetual warfare. Others insist the offerings stayed deeply personal. Turning to the temple side, you find a basin of clear water fed by an attic spring. A carved plaque reads, "Water of Purity." Worshippers dip their fingers to wash before ascending to the inner sanctuary. You cup your hands, feeling the cool liquid glide over your skin, sharpening your awareness. In Hippocratic fashion, ritual water also served as health therapy cold washes, believed to invigorate both mind and body. A marginal note in a classical text hints that pilgrims, after washing, anointed their hair with rosemary oil to preserve the water's blessings. Pollen grains on unearthed combs support this blend of hygiene, horticulture, and piety, an early form of ritual grooming. Sunlight filters through the cella's open door, revealing the chryselephantine statue of Athena Parthenos, ivory flesh, gilded robes, and a small Nike in her outstretched hand. Priests offer silent prayers, their voices hushed. You stand at the threshold, absorbing the statue's presence, a union of human craftsmanship and divine inspiration. A final rite remains the sacrifice of a small goat or pig. The blood is collected in a bronze bowl and sprinkled over the altar's base, its raw metallic scent cutting through incense and oil, to confront worshippers with life's fragility alongside divine favor. Debate persists. Were sacrifices literal fuel for the gods or communal feasts reinforcing social bonds? Bone deposits beyond the temenos suggest cooked meat was shared, blurring ritual slaughter and communal meal. As the last prayer fades, you step back into the sunlit court. Scents of incense oil and sacrifice trail behind you like living memories. In the hush before the city's midday bustle, you sense how each offering oil bread, miniature weapon, drop of spring water knits personal longing into Athens' divine tapestry. Would you dare to leave your own token here, trusting that stone and scent will carry your deepest hopes to Athena's watchful presence? You leave the marble grandeur of the Parthenon behind and set out along the winding sacred way toward Delphi. The air grows cooler as you climb the shadowed slopes of Mount Parnassus pine needles, carpeting the rocky path in a soft hush that blends with the distant chime of temple bells. Each breath carries the crisp scent of mountain herbs, oregano savory, and a hint of wild thyme, inviting calm focus as you approach one of the ancient world's most revered oracles. By the 5th century BCE, Delphi's sanctuary, dedicated to Apollo, drew pilgrims from across Greece seeking guidance. At its heart sat the Pythia, the priestess who delivered cryptic prophecies while positioned on a tripod above a fissure in the earth. Offerings poured in golden tripods, carved lions, and elaborate bronzes testifying to Delphi's reputation as the omphalos, or navel, of the world. You enter the sanctuary through a Doric gateway and pause before the cast bronze omphalos stone. Its ridged surface is worn smooth by thousands of pilgrims who brushed it for a moment of connection. Nearby, an attendant fills your palm with laurel leaves and sprinkles them over a small marble altar. The laurel's piney aroma wafts upward in fragrant curls of smoke from a brazier, invoking Apollo's presence. But the procession was not all solemnity. A folk remedy whispered among pilgrims involved tucking crushed bay nuts into one's robes, slightly intoxicating seeds believed to sharpen the Pythia's focus by stimulating inhalation of the temple's sacred vapors. Archaeologists analyzing terracotta votive deposits have indeed detected trace alkaloids in bay nut fragments, suggesting a discreet, unsanctioned pharmacy at Delphi. You step toward the adytum, the inner shrine, accessible only to priests and petitioners. Low voices murmur prayers as you stand before a bronze tripod once dedicated by Croesus of Lydia, its fluted legs gleaming in torchlight. A priest gestures for you to kneel and whisper your question, then guides you through a narrow stairway to the Pythia's chamber above. Each echoing step feels like a heartbeat in the cool hush. Inside the chamber, the Pythia sits on her tripod legs, crossed, chin-lifted face, serene. Cracks in the earth vent, faint vapors that swirl at her feet. You watch as she inhales deeply, her robes billowing in silent breath. Then, in measured tones, she begins to speak loose syllables, forming half-words that the priests transcribe and shape into a full prophecy. Her voice quavers, rises and settles like wind through reeds. Ancient writers disagreed on these vapors' nature. Some claimed they came from ethylene seeping through subterranean fissures. Others insisted the Pythia's trance was purely psychological, induced by ritual chanting and expectation. Modern geologists have found trace hydrocarbons in Delphi's geology, but debate continues over whether they could truly intoxicate. You offer a small bronze statuette of a kneeling warrior at the tripod's base, your votive pledge of thanks should Apollo grant deliverance. The polished metal glints under oil lamp glow, and you feel anticipation ripple through you as the priests lower a wooden tablet inscribed with your question into a bronze bowl. They bow and step back, awaiting the Pythia's pronouncement. In that charged silence, her voice rises again, weaving a riddle of fate. When the baleful star of winter sets the third sun's glare, reveals the path not seen. The priests interpret, prepare your fleet with caution at the third dawn, for fortune favors neither haste nor delay. Relief and frustration mingle. Apollo's guidance is as elusive as the temple's flickering shadows. A modern scholarly question emerges. Were these cryptic pronouncements genuine attempts at divination or carefully crafted ambiguity, preserving the oracle's authority regardless of outcome? Some historians see the Pythia as a political advisor, smoothing civic tensions with non-committal counsel. Others note records of failed prophecies that did little to diminish Delphi's prestige. You descend the narrow stair into the open air, the laurel's aroma still clinging to your tunic. Outside, pilgrims cluster beneath columned walkways, trading whispers of their own riddled answers. On a low table, you spot a weathered stele, listing a Boeotian general's prophecy legible. Despite chipped letters, he will conquer where he least suspects. His subsequent victory over the Phocians attests to the power of oracular performance. A whispered footnote suggests some pilgrims later annotated their transcribed prophecies, scratching glosses to fit unfolding events. Palimpsest-like markings on temple tablets hint that visitors refined Apollo's words to serve political agendas or personal triumphs. The blurred line between divine message and human editing argues for cautious interpretation. Before you leave Delphi's sacred precincts, you pause at the Castalia Spring. Its crystal waters pool in a carved basin where pilgrims purified body and spirit. You cup your hands in the ancient flow, feeling its cool clarity slip over your skin, and taste a faint mineral edge, a sensory echo of the earth's hidden depths. Many believed that only purified minds could truly hear Apollo's will. Yet some accounts warn that over-purification days of ritual abstinence left petitioners too jittery to frame coherent questions, turning the Pythia's words into fractured mirrors of their own anxieties. Modern psychologists liken this to sensory deprivation's effects on perception, suggesting that disciplinary rites shape both readiness and desire for divine contact. As you walk away from Delphi's sanctuary, the pine-tinged breeze carries distant temple bells and murmurs of merchants copying prophecies for profit. You feel the weight of your own question hang in the air, half answered, half mysterious, an echo entwined with every rustle of olive leaves. Would you dare entrust your fate to a breath and a riddle, placing your hopes in a voice born of vapor, ritual, and centuries of expectation? You slip through the Propylaea's grand marble gateway just as the mid-morning sun gilds the steps entering the agora's broad expanse, where citizens gather beneath stoas for the Ecclesia Athens Assembly of Equals. A gentle breeze stirs togas, carrying the blended scents of olive oil and sun-warmed stone as you join the throng heading toward the Pnyx, the hill where democracy found its voice. By the reforms of Cleisthenes in 508 BCE, Athens had restructured its tribes and councils to dilute aristocratic power, empowering every male citizen, regardless of wealth, to vote on laws and policy. The ecclesia met up to 40 times a year on the Pnyx's step terraces, each voice equal a radical experiment in collective rule. You climb the rough-hewn steps carved into the bedrock, feeling the stone's warm grain beneath your sandals. Around you, neighbors greet one another. Calimera, Demetrios, Eudaimon sit here. The assembly's murmur swells like gentle surf, punctuated by the sharp tap of a ballot tablet being read aloud, an invitation for you to join the debate. But don't assume pure equality reigned here. A nifty procedural hack kept demagogues and check speakers, drew lots for their turn, then had only 2 minutes at the bema, the speaker's platform, to make their case. A timekeeper dropped a pebble into a water clock. Its rising hiss marked the end of one speech and the start of the next, cutting off long-winded orators with an audible ASMR cue. At the bema, you watch a fellow citizen unfurl a decree proposing grain subsidies. His voice, carried by the platform's acoustic design, rings clearly even to those on the edges of the crowd. You notice carved recesses in the stone floor cut to funnel and amplify soundproof of Athenian attention to public address. After debate, citizens voted by dropping small pottery shards, ostraca, inked with a name, into baskets. If a man's name appeared more than 6,000 times, he faced ostracism exile for 10 years. This ritual check on power protected the city from would-be tyrants, though it sometimes ousted effective statesmen on a whim. You sift through a handful of ostraca, in your palm faded fragments inscribed by scores of others. You trace the rough grooves of letters spelling Themistocles or Aristides, each shard a tangible vote of trust or fear. The tactile memory of pressed clay reminds you how democracy here depended on these physical tokens. Nearby, a scribe records results on a waxed tablet. Public transparency ensured every citizen could verify the counts. Yet scholars debate whether illiterate Athenians truly influenced outcomes, or simply followed cues from philanthropoi, wealthy patrons guiding their demise. Inscriptions show some districts coordinated voting blocks, suggesting that democratic ideals intertwined with factional persuasion. When the tally is announced, a herald proclaims oikos kerdos eis ton daemon. Private gain yields to the people's welfare. The crowd responds with measured applause, hand claps, and the gentle thudding of leather-soled sandals echoing off the Nyx's slopes. You feel the living pulse of civic power, a force made manifest by stone shards and thousands of voices. Down the hill you pass the Boulevardarian, where the Council of 500 chosen by lot prepares to draft laws based on today's decree. You skirt columns etched with councilors' names, each citizen's lot publicly recorded for accountability. The soft tap of your sandals on the marble portico blends with the rustle of papyrus petitions being filed at clerks' tables. A modern question lingers: did Athens' lottery system genuinely democratize governance, or did it merely spread elite privilege among propertied males? Corruption in later centuries suggests many citizens lacked the expertise for complex policy, while others argue the system was a powerful check on entrenched power. As you loop back through the agora toward home, the clack of pottery wheels and the murmur of merchants remind you that democracy thrived not in distant councils, but in everyday markets and workshops. Each citizen's vote was rooted in daily life, grain prices, artisan guilds, naval needs, ensuring the polis remained both a political experiment and a living community. Would you dare to cast your own Ostrakhan trusting clay and crowd to guard against tyranny, or fear that majority rule silences expertise in favor of popular whim? You slip through a narrow alley off the agora, where laughter and music waft like a gentle breeze, arriving at a small open square ringed by whitewashed walls and vine-covered trellises. Colorful banners flutter overhead, and the warm scent of roasted pine nuts and sweet wine draws you toward a low wooden stage, the city's impromptu outdoor theater. Even before formal tragedies graced grand amphitheaters, Greek cities teemed with Peripoli street entertainers who wove music, dance, and pantomime into everyday life. Their performances delighted citizens of every class, from market stalls to temple precincts. You find a spot on sun-warmed cobblestones as a troupe of mimes appears, each donning a simple linen mask with exaggerated features. Children's laughter ripples through the crowd as one mime pantomimes the wine-pressing ritual, kneading invisible grapes and straining under an imagined beam, while another flails as a fumbling suitor whose ornate garland collapses at his feet. The audience leans in toes, curling against the stones, caught up in their wordless comedy. But these humble masks shine for a reason. Between scenes, apprentices dunk them into a basin of barley water mixed with crushed pomegranate seeds. The fruity polish cleans plaster without wearing away painted lines, and its stickiness holds fast to dust until the next scene. Broken mask fragments recovered near ancient workshops still bear faint red stains, a silent testament to this playful backstage ritual. Next, a lone lyre player takes up his instrument, tuning each string until it rings clear. He then launches into a haunting melody, weaving minor harmonies that paint images of lost loves and distant seas. The plucked notes, soft as raindrops on marble, carry through the square, and you close your eyes to let the music cradle your thoughts. When he curls a final chord, coins clink in his battered bowl, tokens of gratitude for his art. Many street musicians blended modes Dorian and Phrygian scales to surprise and captivate their audiences. While formal festivals adhered to strict musical conventions, these parapoli freely mixed tonalities, creating hybrid airs that later influenced classical composers. An inscription on a 4th century amphora even praises a daring mode blender as an innovator rather than a mere entertainer. With that, two acrobats bound onto the stage, spinning and vaulting with lithe precision. They construct a human pyramid balance on narrow shoulders and cartwheel beneath a painted archway. Each landing a soft thud on straw rugs elicits gasps and cheers. The audience's shared breath quickens as they push human limits under the open sky. Hidden in their performance, acrobats often wore leather caps studded with tiny metal discs beneath their robes. With every flip, the caps jingled, turning each movement into a percussive flourish, an auditory underscore to their daring feats. Bronze studs recovered under ancient seating slabs hint at how widespread this kinetic ornamentation once was. As applause fades, a small troupe of actors appears draped in togas lightly outlined with charcoal to suggest gods and heroes. One dons Athena's helmet and brandishes a carved wooden spear. Another wears grapevine and Dionysus's honor tambourine in hand. They enact Athena's contest with Poseidon for the city's patronage, pantomiming divine rivalry in artful silence. Even these simple costumes took care actors sealed mask edges with a thin olive oil and ash mixture to improve projection and keep masks secure during energetic scenes. Gray residue found on marble benches near performance areas reveals the rustic precision of these street theaters. Finally, a juggler strides forward, three blazing torches in hand. He casts them high in graceful arcs, each torch a comet's tail against the twilight sky, and catches them with flawless timing. The crowd's collective gasps swells like ocean spray. For his finale, he releases two torches at once and catches both flames flickering before he bows deeply. To protect their skin and handles, jugglers sometimes grease torches with bay laurel extract, its mythic association with victory-lent symbolic fireproofing long before chemistry existed. Residue tests on charred handles confirm that performers harnessed botanical know-how to tame the flames. As the sun dips fully below the rooftops, the troupe returns for a final bow beneath a painted star field on linen backdrops. You step forward to drop a copper drachma into their meager collection bowl, a soft clink that echoes like a promise. Replacing their masks with weary smiles, the actors remind you of the human heart beneath every performance. Walking away, the square still hums, laughter lingers, torch sparks drift like fireflies, and echoes of lyre and laughter thread through the dusk. Here in this modest corner of Athens street, theater transformed ordinary moments into shared wonder. Would you dare to step onto that humble stage between laughter and awe and leave your own mark on the city's living canvas? You leave the laughter of street performers behind and make your way east toward the stadium at Olympia, the air growing cooler beneath towering plane trees and the faint scent of singed olive wood drifting from nearby fire shrines. Every 4 years, Greeks from across the polis gather here for the Olympic Games, an event that transcends borders, uniting city-states in peaceful competition under Zeus's watchful gaze. A well-known fact, the Olympic Games, founded in 776 BCE at the sanctuary of Zeus, featured events such as the Stadion, a short sprint of roughly 200 meters, wrestling, boxing, the pentathlon, long jump, javelin, discus, stadion, and wrestling, and the hoplite race in full armor. Victors earned olive wreaths taken from sacred groves and of fame that echoed through poems and statues alike. You slip into the packed stadium just as torchbearers light bronze braziers around the track. The smell of laurel resin mingles with sun-warmed dust rising from the compacted earth of the stadium. You settle onto a tier of limestone seats, their smooth surfaces still warm, and feel the crowd's collective anticipation in the low murmur of togas and chitons. But don't let the splendor of olive wreaths and roaring cheers distract you from some curious behind-the-scenes rituals athletes fasted for days beforehand to lighten the body, while trainers rubbed olive oil mixed with ash onto their skin, both to accentuate musculature for the judges and to protect against chafing. Traces of oil residue have even been detected on ancient statue bases, confirming this once common practice. At the herald's trumpet blast, you rise with the crowd. 10 sprinters in loincloths kneel at starting lines carved into the earth. A magistrate calls Hebasco, and a leather cord snaps taut, signaling the start. The runners explode forward sandals or bare feet, thwacking the ground in rapid rhythm. You feel each footfall's resonance through the stone beneath you, a palpable drumbeat of raw human power. A factual aside, early races used a starting rope called the heremos to ensure simultaneous starts. Later, bronze starting blocks replaced ropes to reduce false starts, and rudimentary lanes were marked in the dust proto-precursors to modern track lanes. As the runners cross the finish line, a painted stone, you join the applause that swells like a wave. The victor chest heaving steps forward to receive a fresh olive wreath. The crowd's cheers rise again as he approaches the altar of Zeus to pour a libation. Each step toward the altar is a silent prayer, binding personal glory to divine favor. Between events, merchants weave through the stadium's tunnels, offering roasted chickpeas, salted figs, and cups of watered-down wine crethona mixed with unfermented grape must. You nibble on a crunchy chickpea, its creamy center yielding beneath salty oil, and sip the tart wine, its cool sweetness a perfect antidote to the midday sun. A quirky Olympic custom holds that athletes chewed wild celery stalks between events to ward off cramps, an early form of sports medicine. Fragments of celery pollen found near the Palestra wrestling school support this ancient remedy. Next, you head to the wrestling and boxing grounds. 2 wrestlers grapple in a sand-filled pit, their bodies caked in dust and oil. Matches last until one man's back touches the ground, a test of leverage over brute strength. You crouch at the edge, feeling sand sift beneath your knees and hearing the fighters' labored breaths. In the adjacent boxing arena, opponents wrap their hands in leather jimentas, lacking modern padding, and trade precise punishing strikes. No timed rounds or judges' scorecards mean matches end only when one fighter can no longer stand. The crowd's gasps echo through the air as a boxer's ear threatens to split. His trainer dabs the cut with sweet wine to stem the bleeding. Scholars still debate whether these leather bindings protected athletes or simply shifted injuries to knuckles and wrists. Osteological studies of Hellenistic remains show knuckle fractures consistent with ancient pugilism. The pentathlon's long jump draws you next. Competitors grasp halteres, small stone or bronze weights in each hand, swinging them forward before launch to boost momentum. They dive into the sand, and judges measure the furthest leap. Scholars dispute whether halteres genuinely extended distance or served mainly as ritual props, tying athletic feats to mythic traditions. As dusk approaches, you return to the stadium center for the closing procession. Victors march forward, bearing tripod shields and painted vases on their shoulders. You rise as torch-bearers flank the altar, their flames reflecting off polished bronze. A priest intones the Ekicheria, the sacred Olympic truce proclaiming, No wars shall touch Olympia, and the assembly echoes. So be it. This fragile peace bound warring cities in safe passage for athletes and spectators alike. Yet history records occasional breaches, mercenary incursions, or local skirmishes, reminding you that even the highest ideals bow to realpolitik. Lanterns glow along the stadium steps as the ceremony ends. You step down into the cooling air, carrying the weight of centuries of athletic devotion, personal sacrifice, divine homage, and communal pride etched into every step, every cheer, every whispered vow. Would you dare to stand at that starting line in loincloth and olive wreath, trusting your own body heart and the favor of Zeus to carry you into legend? You leave the laughter of street performers behind and make your way east toward the stadium at Olympia. The air grows cooler beneath towering plane trees carrying the faint scent of singed olive wood drifting from nearby fire shrines. Every 4 years, Greeks from across the polis gather here for the Olympic Games, an event that transcends borders, uniting city-states in peaceful competition under Zeus's watchful gaze. A well-known fact, the Olympic Games, founded in 776 BCE at the sanctuary of Zeus, featured events such as the stadion, a short sprint of roughly 200 meters, wrestling, boxing, the pentathlon, long jump, javelin, discus, stadion, and wrestling, and the hoplite race in full armor. Victors earned olive wreaths taken from sacred groves and a fame that echoed through poems and statues alike. You slip into the packed stadium just as torchbearers light bronze braziers around the track. The smell of laurel resin mingles with sun-warmed dust rising from the compressed earth of the stadium. You settle onto a tier of limestone seats, smooth, still, warm, and feel the crowd's collective anticipation in the low murmur of togas and chieftains. But don't let the splendor of olive wreaths and roaring cheers distract you from curious behind-the-scenes rituals. Athletes fasted for days beforehand to lighten the body, while trainers rubbed olive oil mixed with ash onto their skin, both to accentuate musculature for the judges and to protect against chafing. Traces of oil residue have even been detected on ancient statue bases, confirming this once common practice. At the herald's trumpet blast, you rise with the crowd. 10 sprinters in loincloths kneel at starting lines carved into the earth. A magistrate calls Hebasco, and a leather cord snaps taut, signaling the start. The runners explode forward, sandals or bare feet thwacking the ground in rapid rhythm. You feel each footfall's resonance through the stone beneath you, a palpable drumbeat of raw human power. A factual aside, early races used a starting rope called the heremos to ensure simultaneous starts. Later, bronze starting blocks replaced ropes to reduce false starts, and rudimentary lanes were marked in the dust proto-precursors to modern track lanes. As the runners cross the finish line, a painted stone, you join the applause that swells like a wave. The victor chest heaving steps forward to receive a fresh olive wreath. The crowd's cheers rise again as he approaches the altar of Zeus to pour a libation. Each step toward the altar is a silent prayer binding personal glory to divine favor. Between events, merchants weave through the stadium's tunnels, offering roasted chickpeas, salted figs, and cups of watered-down wine, crithone, mixed with unfermented grape must. You nibble on a crunchy chickpea, its cream a center, yielding beneath salty oil, and sip the tart wine, its cool sweetness, a perfect antidote to the midday sun. A quirky Olympic custom holds that athletes chewed wild celery stalks between events to ward off cramps, an early form of sports medicine. Fragments of celery pollen found near the Palestra Wrestling School support this ancient remedy. Next, you head to the wrestling and boxing grounds. Two wrestlers grapple in a sand-filled pit, their bodies caked in dust and oil. Matches last until one man's back touches the ground, a test of leverage over brute strength. You crouch at the edge, feeling the sand sift beneath your knees and hearing the fighters' labored breaths. In the adjacent boxing arena, opponents wrap their hands in leather jimantes, lacking modern padding, and trade precise punishing strikes. No timed rounds or judges' scorecards mean matches end only when one fighter can no longer stand. The crowd's gasps echo through the air as a boxer's ear threatens to split. His trainer dabs the cut with sweet wine to stem the bleeding. Scholars still debate whether these leather bindings protected athletes or simply shifted injuries to knuckles and wrists. Osteological studies of Hellenistic remains show knuckle fractures, consistent with ancient pugilism. The pentathlon's long jump draws you next. Competitors grasp halteres, small stone or bronze weights in each hand, swinging them forward before launch to boost momentum. They dive into the sand, and judges measure the furthest leap. Scholars dispute whether halteres genuinely extended distance or served mainly as ritual props tying athletic feats to mythic traditions. As dusk approaches, you return to the stadium center for the closing procession. Victors march forward, bearing tripod shields and painted vases on their shoulders. You rise as torchbearers flank the altar, their flames reflecting off polished bronze. A priest intones the Ekacheria, the sacred Olympic truce proclaiming, "No wars shall touch Olympia," and the assembly echoes, "So be it this fragile peace-bound warren cities in safe passage for athletes and spectators alike." Yet history records occasional breaches, mercenary incursions, or local skirmishes, reminding you that even the highest ideals bow to realpolitik. Lanterns glow along the stadium steps as the ceremony ends. You step down into the cooling air, carrying the weight of centuries of athletic devotion, personal sacrifice, divine homage, and communal pride etched into every step, every cheer, every whispered vow. Would you dare to stand at that starting line in loincloth and olive wreath, trusting your own body heart and the favor of Zeus to carry you into legend? You leave the laughter of street performers behind and make your way east toward the stadium at Olympia. The air grows cooler beneath towering plane trees carrying the faint scent of singed olive wood drifting from nearby fire shrines. Every 4 years, Greeks from across the Polis gather here for the Olympic Games, an event that transcends borders, uniting city-states in peaceful competition under Zeus's watchful gaze. A well-known fact, the Olympic Games, founded in 726 BCE at the Sanctuary of Zeus, featured events such as the Stadion, a short sprint of roughly 200 meters, wrestling, boxing, the pentathlon, long jump, javelin, discus, stadium, and wrestling, and the hoplite race in full armor. Victors earned olive wreaths taken from sacred groves and a fame that echoed through poems and statues alike. You slip into the packed stadium just as torchbearers light bronze braziers around the track. The smell of laurel resin mingles with sun-warmed dust rising from the compressed earth of the stadium. You settle onto a tier of limestone seats, smooth, still, warm, and feel the crowd's collective anticipation in the low murmur of togas and chitons. But don't let the splendor of olive wreaths and roaring cheers distract you from curious behind-the-scenes rituals. Athletes fasted for days beforehand to lighten the body, while trainers rubbed olive oil mixed with ash onto their skin, both to accentuate musculature for the judges and to protect against chafing. Traces of oil residue have even been detected on ancient statue bases, confirming this once common practice. At the herald's trumpet blast, you rise with the crowd. 10 sprinters in loincloths kneel at starting lines carved into the earth. A magistrate calls Hibosco, and a leather cord snaps taut, signaling the start. The runners explode forward, sandals or bare feet, thwacking the ground in rapid rhythm. You feel each footfall's resonance through the stone beneath you, a palpable drumbeat of raw human power. A factual aside, early races used a starting rope called the heremos to ensure simultaneous starts. Later, bronze starting blocks replaced ropes to reduce false starts, and rudimentary lanes were marked in the dust proto-precursors to modern track lanes. As the runners cross the finish line, a painted stone, you join the applause that swells like a wave. The victor chest heaving steps forward to receive a fresh olive wreath. The crowd's cheers rise again as he approaches the altar of Zeus to pour a libation. Each step toward the altar is a silent prayer, binding personal glory to divine favor. Between events, merchants weave through the stadium's tunnels, offering roasted chickpeas, salted figs, and cups of watered-down wine, chrythone mixed with unfermented grape must. You nibble on a crunchy chickpea, its creamy center yielding beneath salty oil, and sip the tart wine, its cool sweetness, a perfect antidote to the midday sun. A quirky Olympic custom holds that athletes chewed wild celery stalks between events to ward off cramps, an early form of sports medicine. Fragments of celery pollen found near the Palestra wrestling school support this ancient remedy. Next, you head to the wrestling and boxing grounds. 2 wrestlers grapple in a sand-filled pit, their bodies caked in dust and oil. Matches last until one man's back touches the ground, a test of leverage over brute strength. You crouch at the edge, feeling the sand sift beneath your knees and hearing the fighters' labored breaths. In the adjacent boxing arena, opponents wrap their hands in leather himantes, lacking modern padding and trade-precise punishing strikes. No timed rounds or judges' scorecards mean matches end only when one fighter can no longer stand. The crowd's gasps echo through the air as a boxer's ear threatens to split. His trainer dabs the cut with sweet wine to stem the bleeding. Scholars still debate whether these leather bindings protected athletes or simply shifted injuries to knuckles and wrists. Osteological studies of Hellenistic remains show knuckle fractures, consistent with ancient pugilism. The pentathlon's long jump draws you next. Competitors grasp halter's small stone or bronze weights in each hand, swinging them forward before launch to boost momentum. They dive into the sand and judges measure the furthest leap. Scholars dispute whether halteres genuinely extended distance or served mainly as ritual props tying athletic feats to mythic traditions. As dusk approaches, you return to the stadium center for the closing procession. Victors march forward, bearing tripod shields and painted vases on their shoulders. You rise as torch-bearers flank the altar, their flames reflecting off polished bronze. A priest intones the ekekcharia, the sacred Olympic truce proclaiming, "No wars shall touch Olympia," and the assembly echoes. So be it, this fragile peace, bound warring cities in safe passage, for athletes and spectators alike. Yet, history records occasional breaches, mercenary incursions, or local skirmishes, reminding you that even the highest ideals bow to realpolitik. Lanterns glow along the stadium steps as the ceremony ends. You step down into the cooling air, carrying the weight of centuries of athletic devotion, personal sacrifice, divine homage, and communal pride etched into every step, every cheer, every whispered vow. Would you dare to stand at that starting line in loincloth and olive wreath, trusting your own body heart and the favor of Zeus to carry you into legend? You slip through a narrow vine-draped laneway off the agora and arrive at a modest courtyard lined with whitewashed walls, each bearing small scratched inscriptions, protection sigils, scrawled in charcoal and ochre. The air tastes faintly of crushed time and sun-warmed stone, inviting hushed attention. Here, Athenians freely blend daily routine with whispered superstition, seeking small safeguards against unseen forces. A well-known fact, ancient Greeks held a rich tapestry of folk beliefs, apotropaic rituals meant to ward off the evil eye, Bascano curses, and misfortune. Homes and public spaces brimmed with protective symbols, painted eyes over doorways, hanging phallic charms to avert envy, and buried lead tablets kata desmoa, hidden beneath thresholds to neutralize harmful spells. You pause before a low altar piled with offerings of salt breadcrumbs and chipped olive oil jars, a daily thigmos ritual. Citizens sprinkle a pinch of salt at each new threshold, home door, workshop entrance, even inside a carriage, believing its crystalline sharpness repels malevolent spirits. You collect a pinch between thumb and forefinger, taste its stark bite, and let it fall in a silent arc across the courtyard's tile. Each grain is a miniature ward against whispered harm. But don't mistake these humble gestures for mere superstition. A quirky custom recorded in marginal notes calls for dipping a finger in salt and flicking it to the right, never the left, to align with the auspicious path of Helios. Archaeological surveys in residential blocks find precisely right-tilted salt scatterings at every entry, a tactile thread of communal belief woven into Athenian daily life. Ahead, you see a cluster of small black-painted terracotta masks, gorgonea, tacked above door lintels. Their grimacing faces, bulging eyes, and lolling tongues ward off harm through grotesque humor. You run a finger along the curved horn of one mask. Its ceramic glaze remains glossy despite centuries' testimony to the craftspeople who shaped apotropaic art into unignorable guardians. A factual aside, gorgonea date back to Mycenaean times and were widely adopted across the polis, from houses to granaries. Their ubiquity reflects a belief in visible, even mocking defenses against envy and ill will. Some masks incorporate nails and bronze studs, tiny spikes, reinforcing their protective power through physical deterrence. Nearby, a vine-entwined column bears faint tally marks, tiny crosses scratched at random heights. Locals believed each cross represented a narrowly averted mishap, crossing out a prophecy of misfortune once the day passed safely. You count 18 crosses each, a silent echo of daily danger avoided by simple personal record-keeping. You step into a small shrine niche carved into the courtyard wall, where a lone clay statuette of Hermes Psychopompos stands winged messenger guiding souls. Worshippers touch its winged feet before departing, seeking safe passage through uncertain realms, public trials, sea voyages, or neighborhood disputes. You press your palm to the statuette's thigh, its surface worn smooth, a silent testament to everyday anxieties carried by countless hands. Yet a deeper nuance emerges. Some visitors tuck tiny scraps of written petitions, prayers for safe travels or fair court outcomes into Hermes' robe folds, believing his psychopomp role extended to delivering petitions to the gods. Excavations beneath these shrines have yielded faded papyrus fragments bearing hastily scrawled entreaties, a hidden archive of personal fears and hopes. You cross the courtyard to a low bench where a matron arranges 7 pebbles in a circle, a miniature casting of the Claritarian-inspired class used to decide minor disputes or assign chores. Each pebble represents a household member. Drawing stones from a small pouch determines who fetches water or lights the evening lamp. The randomness invokes both chance and divine will, diffusing potential conflict through mundane divination. A debated detail. Scholars disagree whether pebble casting served primarily as conflict resolution or as a playful game reinforcing social bonds. Some inscriptions label pebble courts for household peace, while others frame them as children's amusements, suggesting a dual role in both governance and play. As afternoon light softens, you approach a low table strewn with lead sheets, katadesmoi, used to curse tormentors or settle grudges. A petitioner writes an enemy's name on one sheet, folds it thrice, and pierces it with nails before burying it under a threshold. Though legally frowned upon, the practice flourished in secret, revealing an undercurrent of personal justice outside formal courts. You hold a folded tablet, its lead cold and weighty in your palm, the ironed pleats sharp as the resentment they embody. Yet scholars debate the practical efficacy of curses. Did the dead or demonies enforce these secret oaths? Or did the act serve as catharsis for the afflicted? Some experts suggest that writing and burying names granted petitioners psychological closure regardless of supernatural intervention. Finally, you step beneath a low-eaved portico, hung with wicker baskets filled with dried rue, a potent herb dedicated to Aphrodite and Hecate, believed to ward off plague, snakebite, and malevolent spells alike. You lift a basket, inhale rue's bitter green aroma, a menthol-like sting that clears your sinuses. Women and children often hung rue bunches over cradles to protect infants, a botanical talisman bridging domestic care and spiritual defense. A modern ethnobotanical debate lingers. Did rue's antimicrobial compounds justify its widespread use against disease, or did its symbolic potency far outweigh any real medicinal benefit? Traces of rutin and other bioactive molecules in rue suggest some physiological effects, but the robust belief in its supernatural efficacy underscores a holistic blend of medicine and magic. As dusk falls, lanterns flicker to life, their tiny flames winking at the scratched crosses and gorgon masks. You feel the courtyard's superstitions, salt masks, pebbles, curses, rue woven into everyday life like protective threads and fabric. Each ritual, modest yet deliberate, speaks to a culture attuned to both seen and unseen forces. Would you dare to scatter salt at every threshold, scratch your own cross, or bury a curse beneath these stones, entrusting clay lead and salt with your deepest fears? You leave the laughter of street performers behind and follow a winding lane to a low-roofed tavern, the scent of sizzling fish and sweet wine billowing like a welcome banner. A carved wooden sign swings above the door, Cosmo Thetis Order of the Vine, inviting travelers to sample the hearty yet humble fare of Athenian street taverns. Inside rough-hewn tables and low benches cluster beneath oil lamp glow, and the soft clink of clay cups and murmured stories set the evening's rhythm. A well-known fact, 3 obol taverns charge 3 obols, half a drachma for simple meals, barley porridge pulls, flatbreads, olives, and small fish. These taverns served laborers, soldiers, and philosophers alike as lively social hubs where news, gossip, and poetry flowed as freely as the watered-down wine. You settle onto a straw-strewed bench, tucking your cloak beneath you as a kindly innkeeper ladles steaming poles rich with chopped onions and fresh herbs. The porridge's warmth seeps into your palms, and its smoky, savory aroma draws you in. A taste reveals tender barley, the sharp bite of onion, and the bright note of thyme, a flavor both grounding and enlivening after a day of wandering. But behind this bustling scene lies a resourceful trick to stretch scarce barley supplies some cooks stirred in crushed chickpea flour. This bulked up the porridge, leaving a slightly grittier texture, but ensured no one left hungry. Archaeological residue analysis of tavern cooking pots confirm this clever hack. A server offers a tray of tiny grilled sardines skewered on slender twigs, each fish shimmering with olive oil and specks of sea salt. You pick one up by the tail and bite. The crispy skin crackles beneath your teeth, yielding to tender, oily flesh that tastes of the Aegean. Between bites, you dip flatbread into the pooled sardine juices, savoring the melding of crust and sea. Around you, a circle of patrons debates the latest news from Sicily, a tyrant's overthrow, a grain shipment delayed by pirates. Merchants haggle routes, veterans recall distant coastlines, and poets sketch epic similes in the air. At another table, players toss knucklebones tally in a rhythmic game whose soft percussion blends with the tavern's murmur. A factual aside, these knucklebone games often doubled as divination tools. After a few throws, players believed they could glimpse their fortunes in the scattered bones. Fragments of astragaloi found in tavern sites attest to this playful mix of luck and lore. Above the din, a lone harpist takes the corner near an open window. His fingers coax gentle arpeggios from a small kithara, the notes drifting through the room like candlelight. You close your eyes as the music weaves around you, a soft counterpoint to laughter and conversation. Nearby, a server scatters rose petals over a bowl of watered wine, their delicate fragrance mingling with the savory scent of roasting pine nuts. Yet, some tavern keepers discouraged live music, fearing that too much dancing would spill wine and topple stools. To dampen vibrations, builders sometimes cut shallow grooves beneath raised platforms, subtle dampeners that kept the floor stable. Archaeologists have uncovered these grooves under ancient performance stages, revealing tavern owners' pragmatic flair. You rise to refill your cup at a clay amphora set into a carved stone niche. The wine is pale and tart, mixed 1 part must to 3 parts water, then steeped with dried mint and pine resin to freshen stale vintages. You sip, tasting a brisk resinous edge beneath fruity sweetness, a distinctive flavor of Attica's vineyards. A curious detail, some patrons craving extra zest dropped a pinch of crushed coriander seeds into their cups. This added a warm, citrusy tang to the wine. Coriander pollen traces on amphora stoppers recovered nearby confirm this delightful improvisation. As night deepens, conversation grows playful. Guests challenge each other to recite lines from Aristophanes' latest comedy mishaps earn a sardine skewer as penalty drawing fresh laughter. The tavern's energy ripples like a living thing punctuated by the hiss of oil lamps catching evening breezes. A modern scholarly debate asks whether these impromptu recitations preserved lost comedic texts or fractured them into countless variants. Tavern archivists, if you can call them that, might have been unwitting custodians of dramatic heritage. Before you leave, the innkeeper presents a small bowl of honey-drizzled pine nuts. You bite into one, its tender crunch releases warm sweetness that coats your tongue, a fitting benediction to an evening of flavor and fellowship. Stepping into the Athenian moonlight, the tavern's warmth lingers in your hair, and memory the steam of porridge, the brine of fish, the echo of harp strings, and the shared spark of human connection. Would you dare to trade your own stories here? Knucklebone tosses, borrowed lines of verse, and brimming cups with strangers, finding kinship in every bite and tune? You slip through the marble arch of Dionysus's hillside sanctuary just as dawn's first glow tinges the festival tents in rosy hues. The scent of fermenting wine drifts on the breeze, mingling with wild ivy blossoms draped over rough-hewn altars. All around you, citizens don woven masks, grinning satyrs, solemn tragedians, and wine-swollen maenads, eager to merge joyous abandon with ritual devotion in the city Dionysia. A well-known fact, the city Dionysia in Athens, held each spring to honor Dionysus Eleutherius, featured processions, dramatic competitions, and communal feasting. Playwrights debuted new tragedies and comedies before eager audiences, while choruses of women and men sang hymns, dithyrambs, and performed Bacchic dances, where theater and religious worship became one. You join the throng winding up the hill toward the theater of Dionysus, its stone tiers terraced into the slope. Drummers beat a steady rhythm, boom, boom, beckoning you forward. You feel that pulse in your chest, an embodied prelude to the ecstatic revelry that awaits. Masked participants weave wreaths of ivy and grape leaves, placing them atop their heads to honor the god's vine-born lineage. But don't let the revelry distract you from hidden customs. A quirky preparatory trick involved dipping the inside of masks in a diluted sea salt solution. When worn, the salty tang mixed with perspiration to create a faint saline mist on the wearer's face, thought to induce tears and deepen emotional empathy with the divine. Archaeologists have found salt crystals in mask sockets, evidence of this bittersweet method of ritual empathy. As you ascend the theater's steps, you pass painted panels depicting Dionysus's myths, his birth from Zeus's thigh, his triumph over pirates, and his gift of the vine to mortals. You trace a curling ivy tendril in the fresco and inhale the gentle aroma of fermenting grape must from wooden vats nearby, an ASMR moment of anticipation before the main spectacle begins. The herald's trumpet sounds and the crowd falls silent as the proagon starts. A phallus-carrying torchbearer leads a procession of chorus members, young women chanting in unison. Boys of Bacchus, children of the vine, lead us to frenzy sweet and divine. Their voices rise and fall like wind through treetops, each syllable an invitation to abandon restraint. A factual aside, female chorus members, often daughters of prominent families, perform the Thesmophoria sacred dances, embodying fertility and renewal. Their participation highlighted women's essential role in civic religion, even as they remained excluded from political rights a tension woven throughout Athenian society. You settle on a lower bench as the first play a new tragedy begins. Actors masked as satyrs' broad plaster grins enact the myth of Pentheus, torn apart by frenzied maenads. Each violent tableau unfolds with precise choreography. Tearing cloth, the echo of wooden thyrsus staffs striking the stage, the chorus's anguished wails, a soundscape that reverberates through stone and soul alike. Yet even tragedy here merges with moral reflection. A masked actor embodying Dionysus strides forward and intones, "Will you condemn passion when once you craved it?" The line hangs in the air, challenging each citizen to weigh the gods' gifts of wine, ecstasy, and liberation against the danger of unbridled excess. Between acts, you wander to the wine stalls, where clay phylae overflow with sweet honeyed wine crater wine steeped in grape must. You lift a cup to your lips and sip the amber liquid. Its subtle fizz and sweetness tingle at the back of your throat, a visceral reminder of Dionysus's dual-natured joy and delirium in equal measure. Some patrons drop crushed mint leaves into their cups, a folk remedy to sharpen the senses before the next dramatic twist. A debated detail: did ancient actors swallow small doses of Kaikiana barley and mint concoction, reputed to induce mild visions to heighten their fervor? Chemical tests on surviving masks have found mint alkaloid residues, but whether those traces come from Kaikian or simple aroma remains contested. As the sun dips low, torches blaze along the stage's edges, and a comedic troupe assembles. Clad in vibrant chitons, they lampoon Athens' rulers' bumbling magistrates, fumble togas, and chase runaway slaves in pantomime. The crowd erupts in laughter, civic tensions vented through satire. A historical aside, Aristophanes himself debuted comedies at the city Dionysia, skewering war, corruption, and folly, while tragedies taught moral lessons. Comedies offered catharsis through ridicule. Yet wealthy sponsors sometimes pressured playwrights to temper their criticism, blurring the line between free speech and political influence. You rise to join a final Bacchic dance as drums and flutes converge in polyrhythmic frenzy. Chorus members link hands, forming circles that spin faster until bodies blur in ecstatic whirl. You step into the ring ivy wreath slipping against your brow, and let the pulsing beat guide your feet 2 steps forward, a turn, a leap. Each movement dissolves the boundary between spectator and participant, uniting you in Dionysian celebration. In that swirling moment, joy and fear entwine, the thrill of shared abandon tempered by the knowledge of crossing sacred taboos. Would you dare to surrender fully to this dance, trusting that ecstasy leads to insight rather than ruin? Would you embrace the God who blurs the line between order and chaos, knowing that in his vine-led revelry lie both liberation and peril? You pause at the crest of a gently sloping hill just beyond the city walls, where the last rays of sunlight pool like molten gold across tiled rooftops and olive groves. Below you, the Aegean shimmers in shifting hues of rose and lavender, its soft lap against distant shores, a quiet counterpoint to the evening cicadas' hum. The air cools around you, scented with wild oregano and a faint mineral tang of worn marble, guiding your senses into hushed reflection. A well-known fact in classical Athens, the day officially ended when 3 high-ranking priests, the Thesmothetai, observed the sun dipping behind Mount Hymettus and declared the new day's legal and religious observances closed. This civil twilight, called the Nectelios Horos, marked curfews, the conclusion of trials, and the final extinguishing of public oil lamps in the agora and the ports. You settle onto a smooth slab of pentelic marble, its surface still warm from the afternoon sun, and let the panorama settle into your chest. The whisper of wind through olive leaves becomes an ASMR lullaby, shh, shh, blending with distant temple bells tolling the 9th hour. Each toll seems to echo through time, connecting you to Athenians who paused here centuries ago to honor Dionysus's evening libations and to greet Hecate's nocturnal watch. But don't assume every twilight ritual was lofty. A quirky habit among fishermen involved tying small bits of broken amphora clay to their nets before casting at dusk. As the clay bumped against the water's surface, it mimicked the sounds of small fish luring larger catch toward their nets. Archaeological finds of amphora fragments tangled in sunken nets off Attica's coast confirm this clever acoustic baiting, a practical symphony of survival beneath the placid waves. As you let the sounds wash over you, your eyes drift to the Acropolis, where torch-bearing guardians stand sentinel over the weathered columns. Their torches, fueled by pine resin, sputter in the cooling air, sending tiny sparks upward like fireflies. The flicker illuminates faint traces of vermilion paint along the Parthenon's frieze vestiges of the temple's original polychrome splendor, now reborn each evening in golden glow. A factual aside olive oil lamps, simple terracotta cups with linen wicks littered every household threshold. Lighting these lamps at dusk not only banished darkness, but symbolically invited Athena's wisdom to guard dreams. Some households added crushed rosemary to the oil for its mind, refreshing aroma, a precursor to modern aromatherapy confirmed by pollen analysis in lamp residues from domestic shrines. You lean back, feeling the marble's gentle coolness seep through your tunic as night deepens. Somewhere below, a lone shepherd's flute drifts upward its plaintive notes, weaving through the olive trees, drifting up to your perch. The simplicity feels timeless, as if these same notes have played here for 1,000 years. A whispered question surfaces: did the Greek concept of kairos, seizing the opportune moment, find its most poignant expression in these twilight hours, when civic law closed, ritual paused, and the boundary between day's deeds and night's dreams blurred? Scholars debate whether this liminal time fostered philosophical inwardness or reinforced communal bonds through shared ceremonial transitions. Turning your gaze seaward, you catch the silhouette of a fishing trireme sliding toward harbor under a half-moon's pale arc. Crews, shadows against lantern light, sing a rowing chant to synchronize oar strokes, ta, 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 a gentle, percussive unison. The rhythm resonates with earlier percussion drills in Spartan barracks, or with pebble drops in the ecclesia, each a testament to human coordination guided by sound. Below, the city's lanterns blink on one by one as citizens light oil lamps in windows and along streets. The effect is a cascading glow, stars fallen to earth, outlining marble facades and market stalls alike. You notice a cluster of festival torches left from last night's Dionysia, their embers long spent, yet still smudging the stone with smoky residue, a reminder that every celebration leaves both radiance and shadow. Summoning the day's final ritual, you dip your fingertips into a shallow bowl of Kephesia spring water. The cool clarity pools briefly before spilling onto the marble with a soft plink. Each drop a farewell to the curious twilight custom of Phoebe's youths, preparing for citizenship, carved their names and the date into threshold stones at dusk, cementing their transition from adolescence to civic duty. Those weathered inscriptions, still legible in sheltered niches, tie personal rites of passage to the city's temporal rhythms, binding individual lives to collective history. As stars emerge first, Arcturus, then Orion's belt, you trace constellations once used to navigate ships and structure Attic calendars. The same celestial patterns guided Hesiod's farming verses and Aristarchus's early observations of the heavens. Beneath this sky, generations of sky watchers sought patterns in the heavens, as they did in civic debates, tragedies, and symposia, each a map for human action and aspiration. You rise, brushing dust from your tunic, and take one last look at Athens, transformed by night. The city's hum has softened to distant bell chimes and the occasional splash of waves against the breakwater. Your heartbeat slows, synchronized with nocturnal creatures, crickets' eyes, and the rustle of small mammals in the olive groves. Although today's stories now settle into the quiet dark, you carry their echoes, temple rites, street feasts, philosophical dialogues, athletic triumphs woven into your moment of reflection. This hill's hush reminds you that ancient life like ours balanced light and shadow ceremony and survival, public spectacle, and private prayer. Would you dare to live fully in each passing twilight, embracing its rituals, its lingering scents, and the soft hum of the world slipping from day into night, trusting that in this sacred pause you touch both history's pulse and eternity's beckoning stillness? You rise from your marble seat as the final embers of day fade into velvet night. All around you, Athens settles into a soft repose. The last lamps gutter out. The distant murmur of the night watchman drifts on the breeze, and the olive groves hum with unseen light. In this moment of gentle closure, you feel the city's pulse slow to a steady, comforting heartbeat. Think back on your journey, the hush of dawn on the Acropolis, the warm crackle of pottery wheels, the disciplined stride of Spartan youths, the intimate hush of symposium discourse, and the thunderous acclaim of Olympic victors. Each echo, whether the subtle hiss of cooling wine, the rhythmic thud of oars in the harbor, or the whispered debate under olive trees, wove a tapestry of daily life, long past, yet vividly alive in your senses. Now, as you carry those echoes within you, allow the night's soft chorus crickets in concert, a lone flute's distant lament, the gentle lap of the Aegean to cradle your thoughts. The hushed rituals of salt at thresholds, the hidden scripts of protective charms, and the spirited revelry of Dionysian rites all converge here, where the boundary between then and now thins to a shimmering veil. In the stillness, remember that history is not defined solely by monumental deeds or grand battles, but by small shared moments. The breath drawn before an address on the Pnyx, the hand pressed to a votive relief, the laughter spilling from a crowded tavern, the careful anointing of oil before healing. These are the quiet lessons that outlast marvel and memory, guiding each footstep into tomorrow. May this hour's peace settle in your mind like a gentle balm, each remembered scent and whispered word a soft lantern lighting your dreams. Let the night enfold you in its timeless embrace, carrying you beyond the edges of recorded time into the heart of shared human wonder. Even the oldest tales have something new to say if we listen gently. May this moment of quiet carry you through the night, like a soft breeze through open windows. That is tonight's story. May your dreams be filled with wonder and peace.
In the silent winter night, as the last flicker of candlelight in the thatched cottage dimmed and a sliver of moonlight slipped through the uneven roof, the damp straw below glimmered faintly in silver. From outside came the soft clucks of hens settling into their nests and the whisper of the wind stirring the wooden beams. Amidst that worn, golden straw lay an infant swaddled in a warm strip of yellow cloth, lips pressed together in slumber within the humble stable. Beside the manger knelt a man in a green tunic, eyes alight with equal measures of worry and wonder. Two women knelt nearby, their forms shadowed against the darkness, one clutching a white hen to her chest, the other pressing her hand gently to her pregnant belly. Above them, a circular carving of a mother hen sheltering her brood crowned the rafters, lending an almost sacred hush to the moment. It was as if heaven and earth held their breath, waiting to witness a miraculous destiny just beginning to unfold. Chapter 1. A Dawn in the Straw-Filled Stable. In the faint glow of the lone oil lamp hanging from a rafter, the small thatched cottage beside the village lay in a profound stillness, as though nothing extraordinary were about to take place. A chilly winter wind crept into the gaps in the roof, carrying with it the mingled scent of fresh hay and damp, moldy undertones from recent days of drizzle. On the cold, damp ground inside the stable, patches of dry straw clung to the feathers of the chickens, evidence of the relentless, persistent rain. Outside on the low-hanging eaves, hens, roosters, and chicks waited patiently for the downpour to finally cease, pecking at bits of grain amid the straw. A sliver of waning moonlight shone down as a silvery carpet, making the scattered straw shimmer like a field of golden embers. Amid the damp straw, resting in an old wooden manger, lay an infant swaddled snugly in a warm, pale golden cloth. Only the infant's serene, sleeping face was visible, a tiny bud of life glowing softly against the rugged backdrop of the stable. From outside came the distant echo of roosters crowing and the soft rustle of straw shifting as the chickens scratched about. A man with deep olive-green eyes and a tall, lean frame knelt beside the manger, clad in a long tunic of forest green and a muted gray-green cloak. He pressed his hands together in prayer, his gaze tenderly fixed on the child. Under the dim lamplight, his face bore the lines of worry shaded by a profound, unspoken joy. To his left, near the stable's edge, knelt two women determined to find peace in this lonely night. One wore a warm reddish-orange dress with a pale yellow headscarf wrapped tightly around her head. Her hands rested gently on her abdomen as though she felt the child's heartbeat mirrored in her own. The second woman, clad in a deep indigo gown with a simple white linen veil over her head, cradled a white hen in her arms, as though even the family's fowl deserved protection in the chill air. Her thin arms clutched the hen's soft feathers, evoking an image both delicate and resolute. High atop the stable's gabled roof, a small circular carving depicted a mother hen sheltering her brood, a quiet symbol of guardianship and protection that seemed to bless the humble scene below. Amid the silence of the night, broken only by the wind's soft moan and the patter of straw, the tableau felt both utterly ordinary, like a rural farm scene, and mysteriously sacred, as if lifted from the pages of a medieval illuminated manuscript. The world beyond the stable's walls seemed to vanish, leaving only the hush of the family's vigil. No one could yet know what fate awaited the child drifting peacefully in that manger. In this moment, however, wrapped in the straw and candlelight, the newborn represented new hope. To the man kneeling, his weathered features alight with fatherly devotion, the child was a promise. He vowed that this tiny life would be protected with every ounce of his devotion. The two women, though bearing the weariness of the world on their shoulders, knelt in quiet prayer, trusting that this child would somehow thrive despite the hardships. Chapter 2. The Journey Home. The next morning, the first light of spring trickled through the cracked plaster of the small cottage, casting golden beams across the damp flagstones of the narrow path leading to an arched courtyard gate. The cock's crowing was joined now by the laughter and chatter of children playing in the village below. Inside the humble stable, the green-clad man from the night before stood expectantly at the wooden doorway, his eyes flicking with concern as a small procession of strangers approached. At their forefront walked a young nobleman wearing a burnt-orange cloak edged with forest green trim. Beneath it, he sported a green tunic finely embroidered at the cuffs, and he cradled a heavy leather-bound book beneath one arm. Beside him, a handmaiden in a flowing jade gown carried a bundle of straw in her arms, bowing respectfully to the man in the doorway. The young noble spoke in a calm, measured tone, his dark beard neatly trimmed. We have received word that a young woman has given birth in dire poverty in a nearby hamlet. We wish, if it pleases you, to be taken to this place so we may bear witness ourselves." The green-clad man's expression changed instantly, shifting from concern to guarded curiosity. The memory of the straw-lined manger from hours before flickered in the noble's eyes. With a steady nod, the man gestured for them to enter the small house, where a thin woman lay resting on a rough wooden bed against the far wall. Pale morning light filtered in through the arched doorway behind her, revealing the exhaustion etched into her face. She stirred as the noble and his entourage stepped in. It was the mother of the newborn from the stable. Through a croak in her throat, she addressed the noble as he approached. "My lord, if you have come for that child." "I hardly know how to explain. I gave birth in this straw-filled stable alone. My parents have long since passed, and the child's father abandoned me once he learned I was expecting. I have managed alone, without a coin to my name, just as you see." The green-clad man moved to her side, resting a gentle hand on her shoulder. "My lord," he implored the noble, "pray do not dismiss us entirely. We are but poor folk who have endured hardship and illness. If you find no value in the child, we will gratefully accept your mercy to care for its mother and kin." The young noble gave a half-smile, placing a hand on the mother's quilt. Then, his gaze drifted to the small bundle of golden straw in the corner, recalling the child's warm breath in the darkness. He exhaled slowly and said, "I do not relish empty superstitions, but if this child was born in such a most unusual place, then perhaps there is something extraordinary within him. We will take him to the northern keep. There the wise and learned may confirm whether he bears any divine mark. Until then, attend to his mother and him, and keep them safe." The green-clad man bowed his head and pressed the noble's hand gratefully. "We thank your grace. If the child bears no gift, show us mercy. If so, we trust in your compassion." With that, the noble turned to his handmaiden. "You two go ahead and guide them. I will follow close behind. Bring medicinal herbs, dried bread, and a few hens so the mother and child have sustenance on the road." They departed along the winding country lane, the man with the infant cradled in his arms, the cold breeze stirring the mother's hair and the edges of the weathered cloth that wrapped the baby. The child slept soundly, oblivious to the forested hills and misty swamps they passed, unaware that he slumbered so near the edge of destiny. Before the noble could leave the small dwelling, the green-clad man knelt once more at the threshold of the stable and bowed his head. "Thank you, your grace. May heaven bear witness to our gratitude." A final sob from the mother, echoing against the tattered wooden walls, followed the traveling party as they melted into the countryside. Chapter 3: Discovery at the Mistbound Keep. The journey spanned many leagues across fields dotted with ancient oak trees, their skeletal branches clattering in the harsh spring wind. Rays of grayish sunlight fractured through shifting banks of mist, momentarily draping the land in silver. Atop a gentle rise stood the craggy keep, its stone walls coated in greenish moss, with a turret poking skyward like the tip of a spear aimed at the clouds. Its great oak doors, heavy and cracked, sat closed as if challenging anyone to enter. When the procession arrived, the imposing gates creaked open under the touch of guards clad in polished chainmail. Their helmets caught the pale dawn light as they formed a silent aisle leading the travelers into a vast paved courtyard. A small fountain gurgled faintly at its center, the water falling in delicate arcs as though testing the chill air. Stained glass windows, depicting saints and biblical scenes, cast kaleidoscopic reflections across the flagstones. Inside the great hall, the noble, now flanked by advisors and officials, stood before a marble dais, the carved dragons and phoenixes on its edges gleaming with an otherworldly sheen. Portraits on the walls recounted epic voyages and holy miracles. One image unmistakably showed a child laid in a manger scene, mirroring the very scene that brought them here. The noble spoke with steely composure. "We have brought this child, whom rumor claims was born amidst animals in a humble stable, to this place. Let learned men and women examine him. Should he possess any divine mark, make it known. If not, we shall return him to his mother, and end this matter." An elder statesman presided from a seat of honor. His gray hair framed a face carved by years of governance and prayer. "Very well," he replied in a gravelly voice. "Summon our wisest physicians, astrologers, and spiritual guides." In bygone ages, texts spoke of children born under a waning moon in such humble settings as forebears of great change. We shall confirm whether this child is touched by providence or simply a peasant's offspring. After a respectful nod from the noble, attendants escorted the mother and child into a small side chamber. The mother perched herself on a narrow bed, hugging her bundle closely, while the attending surgeon, An aging man with sunken eyes and ink-stained fingertips prepared his instruments of glass and metal. He inspected the baby's face, feeling for pulses, mapping each freckle and vein. Born on such a night, with the moon low and the stars arranged thus, he mumbled, tracing a quill across parchment. The child carries the sign of the celestial radiance. Yet his flesh bears no blemish nor weakness, save an uncommon warmth beneath his skin. The mother whispered, her voice trembling. Surely you do not subscribe to mere superstition. He is my son, and I will protect him. The physician, eyes glinting in intrigue, waved his hand. I rely not on superstition but on prognosis and study. Yet this child's reaction to my salves is unexpected. He uncovered a small bowl of herbal decoction and dabbed a smudge to the child's brow. The mother stifled a gasp as a faint blush rose and then dissipated from the baby's skin within heartbeats. Remarkable, he said softly. His resistance is beyond mortal. He may live through the harshest winter. Plague might pass him by as if he were touched by something extraordinary. Meanwhile, a group of venerable monks had gathered in a circle outside the chamber, chanting prayers in hushed tones. Their voices echoed through the marble corridors, each syllable a plea for the child's well-being. The fragrance of incense swirled in the air as they burned frankincense in the smoke wreathed around the pillars, imparting a sense of solemnity as though heaven were itself leaning in to listen. Chapter 4. Sacred Care and Divine Imagery. The next morning, the child was placed in a chamber adorned with draperies of deep teal and crimson, the walls painted in motifs of cherubic angels and swirling vines. A soft rug of scarlet lay underfoot, offering warmth against the stone. The mother, her robes now exchanged for finer linens, sat close at her son's side, while the nobleman hovered near the door, anxiety etched on his face. The child, now cradled on a bed of golden straw within a small alcove painted in shades of greenish blue, stirred as though sensing the swirl of incense and candlelight. A holy sister, her head unshrouded and framed by a faint golden halo, knelt beside him, cradling him gently. Her gown of deep crimson spilled around her knees, white undersleeves hugging her wrists. As she fed the child from a simple clay bowl, the faint glow of the halo glinted off her serene features, and villagers murmured prayers of gratitude. Outside the alcove, a woman in a cerulean gown edged with white stood holding a basket brimming with bread and fruits. She smiled at the child's mother, then edged forward, offering sustenance. Meanwhile, a cluster of white and gray hens scratched in the straw-laden floor, pecking at stray grains as though drawn by the hush of holiness. Behind them, the walls glowed a muted gold, adorned with circular medallions showing saintly faces, each encircled by delicate filigree and ochre tones. Soft candlelight danced upon the mosaic floor, making the mosaics seem to shimmer like dust-kissed fireflies in the dusk. Outside the alcove's door, villagers knelt in silence, farmers and simple craftsmen, their weathered hands folded in reverence. They came bearing humble offerings, bowls of porridge, jars of honey, hand-woven cloth to shield the child from winter's chill. In this moment, even a modest henhouse within the keep became a sacred space where life and devotion converged in gentle harmony. Chapter 5. Teaching and a Brewing Crisis. Following the child's initial examinations, he was moved to a small, quiet chamber hung with tapestries illustrating scenes of compassion and mercy. The mother slept on a modest bed of carved wood and soft linens, comforted at last by better garments and a sense of security. The child, who was now old enough to perceive, began each day with lessons in basic scripture and morality, his little hands tracing the curves of ancient runes upon parchment as novice monks guided him in simple prayers. Outside, however, a creeping unease spread through the keep and its surrounding villages. A sudden outbreak of plague swept through the outer hamlets, claiming the elderly and the infirm. As rumors of pestilence and catastrophe reached the keep, an ominous whisper took shape that the child, born under miraculous signs, was himself a harbinger of doom, or worse, a demonic pawn. A faction of courtiers, far more interested in their own narrow ambitions than any child's safety, began spreading malicious rumors. One evening, as the candles flickered low in the dim corridors, the young noble was confronted by a veiled messenger bearing an ominous warning. If that child lives, your influence wanes, your grace. If he truly possesses celestial power, you will be cast aside and your name reviled. The noble's jaw clenched in frustration. He retorted, voice quivering with resolve. I do not wish to harm a child, but if I must protect him at all costs, I will. Such slander has no basis. Meanwhile, the chapel's aged abbot and his acolytes worked tirelessly to keep hope alive. Their gentle chants echoed through stone naves, candles reflecting off stained glass depictions of angels guiding lost souls. The abbot implored the noble, "We must guard the boy. These slanders spring from fear and ignorance. Let me lead a procession of prayer and light to shield him." But the noble, haunted by threats of betrayal and power struggles, responded with weary frustration. "Every day brings new peril. If I do nothing, conspiracies grow bolder. Save the boy first, then quell the treachery." Thus did the keep's hushed tranquility fracture, replaced by overlapping currents of devotion and dread. Chapter 6. A Night of Desperate Struggle. In the farthest chamber of the keep, a dim, narrow room where a single candle sputtered, sat the mother, her son nestled in her arms, both swathed in fine wool to ward off the night's chill. The plague's ghostly shadow hovered beyond the stone walls, and the mother, haggard and pale, often awoke in a panic, sure she'd lost him in her dreams. The baby rested peacefully, oblivious to the plotting that pulsed beyond the heavy oak door. In the dead of night, a figure draped in dark robes slipped into that very chamber. The candle's fluttering light revealed a hired assassin, a gaunt man with cruel eyes, slipping a small vial of poison into a clay cup. The mother stirred, sensing an intruder. Her heart hammered as she realized the man intended to harm her child. In one swift motion, she lunged from the bed, grabbing his arm. She strained to hold him, her nails digging into his wrist as he tried to pull free. A whisper of steel sliced through the darkness. Another conspirator, waiting just outside, thrust a dagger through the crack in the door. The assassin let out a strangled cry as the blade found its mark. Blood spurted into the candlelight, staining the wooden floor. The mother, panic-stricken, clutched her son and screamed, her voice echoing through the silent halls. Outside, the alarm bells clanged with urgent clangs. Guards in chainmail, swords drawn, flooded the corridors. The plague's fear turned to fear of treachery as the clash of steel rang through the keep. Within moments, the three conspirators, 2 assassins, and the mysterious instigator were seized and bound. Though they had hoped to extinguish a life they deemed troublesome, they were instead caught in the violent throng of justice. The noble, awakened by the uproar, raced through the torchlit corridors. His boots thundered on flagstones still damp from the night's chill. Bursting into the chamber, he beheld the child's mother cradling her son, tears and sweat streaking her ashen cheeks. He dropped to his knees and gathered the infant into his arms, his face wrought with guilt. "I failed you both. I will not let this harm come again." Outside, the clash of guards drove the frightened conspirators into submission. But the noble's heart was already racing with new urgency. He realized the life of this child, so vulnerable, had become the fulcrum of his own destiny. Chapter 7. A Miracle of Light. Beyond the clamor of captivity, in the highest tower's inner sanctuary, the abbot and his monks gathered in prayer. Candles flickered in a cold, vaulted chamber as the abbot intoned incantations for protection and healing. Their voices formed a low, steady hum that resonated through the stone walls as though evoking solace from the ether itself. Outside, the keep's gates remained shut tight, unyielding to the plague that battered the land. Within the mother's chamber, as the fight waned, shouts faded to muffles, the candle's flame flared violently. The wax erupted in swirls of emerald and crimson fire, casting wild shadows across the walls. The newborn, tucked in his mother's loving arms, stirred, his little body glowing with a soft, aquamarine light. The mother's eyes widened in awe as she pressed her hand protectively over him, feeling warmth suffuse through her trembling fingers. At the window's sill, the gilded painting of a saintly visage. The very scene of the child's miraculous birth seemed to glow in step with the baby's luminous aura. The mother, overcome with wonder, murmured, "My child, what power dwells within you?" Below, the nobleman had sprinted to a high window. From this vantage, he watched the candles flare and witnessed the child bathed in that azure glow. A gasp escaped his lips. It is true, a miracle. In his mind's eye, possibilities unfurled like banners in the wind. If he truly carries this divine spark, I must guard him at all costs. Let no conspiracy snuff out this light. Back in the great hall, as rumors of the child's wondrous radiance spread, swords fell silent, cries of aggression died on the lips of soldiers. Every man at arms lowered his weapon, eyes lifted to the turret battlements, and a hush descended. Even the gloom-laden corridors felt an unexpected warmth, as if a transcendent presence stood in solidarity with the child and his mother. Chapter 8. Renewal and Reconciliation. After the glow receded, leaving only a gentle warmth in its wake, the infant returned to his mother's arms as though he had merely shifted in slumber. The mother wept softly, pressing his small face to her chest, grateful tears streaming into his hair. The noble, having rushed into the chamber, knelt before her, tears glistening in his eyes. He lifted the child and bowed low. "Forgive me, mother. I failed in protecting him, but now I see. This child's destiny may be greater than any of us can fathom." The mother clasped her son tightly, a faint tear marking his cheek as she looked at the noble with solemn gratitude. He was a gift from heaven. I only sought to protect him. Below, in the great hall, the elder statesmen and all the assembled courtiers and advisors knelt, their eyes shining with reverence. The elder's voice then boomed. "This is proof of divine presence. Any who doubt shall face consequences for accusing the innocent." The noble placed the infant gently on a cushioned dais. Reverently he turned to the gathering. "From this moment on, no harm shall come to him. Let him be taught of mercy and compassion." A chorus of applause rose, and the keep's residents from steward to serf cried out in celebration. Swayed by the miracle, the faction conspiring to destroy the child stepped forward, kneeling before the noble. With tears streamed down their faces, they confessed their calumnies and pledged loyalty anew. An elder monk then addressed the crowd. "Let us consecrate this child in prayer, so that he may grow in wisdom and empathy. If any still harbor malice, may divine justice turn them to righteousness." Roughly a year passed. Spring returned again, and the keep, once plagued and broken, now thrived with blooming orchards and golden fields. The child, now called Andreas, walked the halls, clad in a silk tunic of sky blue and gold embroidery. Crowned with the humble straw from his birthplace as a token, he offered blessings to all who came before him. Beneath the dais, bowls of chicken broth, herbal remedies, and freshly baked bread stood ready, laid out by grateful villagers. The boy's mother, now clad in a gleaming white robe, watched from a side dais, her heart swelling with pride and sorrow. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "My child has fulfilled his purpose. He has shown us the meaning of faith." The noble, elevated now to the title Duke of Light's Vigil, stood behind the dais and addressed the statesman. "Your guidance and the monk's prayers saved him. He is our blessing." The statesman bowed deeply, his voice thick. "Andreas is heaven's messenger. In his presence, cruelty and fear dissolve." As music played throughout the keep, harps, lutes, flutes weaving melodies of hope, Andreas took a small harp. With a trembling child's voice, he sang 2 lines of verse. "In humble straw, life's ember glows. A light of love through winter's throes." Silence fell as every soul listened, then applause swelled as a tide. Children clapped in delight, elders wept in gratitude. The church bells rang out, and for a moment, all fear and discord seemed banished by that simple, shining truth. Chapter 9. A Peaceful Countryside Reimagined. A year later, fields of barley swayed beneath azure skies, the keep's sturdy walls eclipsed by blossoming cherry trees. Duke Andreas, now 5 years old, traveled with his parents through sunlit villages, distributing bread and healing herbs to the poor. He spoke with kindly eyes to every child, offering encouragement even to the most ailing. "Fear not, dear friend. Spring always returns." Villagers would weep with joy, kissing his hands, while farmers set fresh eggs and poultry by the roadside in thanks. Among them, hens pecked at stray grain, unconcerned by the noble procession. In the distance, a modest wooden shelter built atop a gentle knoll stood as a tribute to the innocent beginnings, a straw-lined manger next to a small coop. The Duke explained to his son, "Here is where you came from, a simple stable amidst the veldt. Remember that humility is the foundation of your heart." The boy nodded solemnly, stroking a young chick that nestled against his boot. He turned to his father. "I will not forget. Every life is precious." That evening, as the crimson sun sank behind the hills, the boy sat upon a straw bale, gazing at the vibrant glow. He closed his eyes and silently prayed. "Grant all your creatures peace. Let fear be banished and love endure." A soft breeze rustled the straw as if echoing his plea. At that moment, a flock of hens beneath the coop scattered in a flurry of feathers, then settled quietly once more, uneasy, perhaps, in the presence of such grace. The Duke glanced at his son, pride and wonder mixing in his eyes. "Your words are the balm the world needs. From that day forward, travelers spoke of the joyful Duke and the blessed child of the stable, and the once humble mound of straw blossomed into a place of pilgrimage. Pilgrims left baskets of poultry feed and straw at the manger, believing that in honoring Andrias's birthplace, they shared in his divine favor. Chapter 10, Legacy of the Manger. Seasons passed, and the Duke's realm thrived in prosperity. Under the steady guidance of Duke Andrias, famine and disease receded. Villagers cultivated their fields with renewed vigor. Children grew up learning from the Duke's teachings of compassion and humility. Each spring, a festival filled the hills with laughter. Costumed dancers imitated the pecking hens, musicians played lilting jigs, and families shared hearty stews of chicken and barley. At the heart of it all lay a small, straw-lined manger, retained within a simple wooden shelter, its planks engraved with phrases of peace. Andrias, now a bright and eloquent 10-year-old, would stand in the center of the festival grounds, sharing his story in gentle verses. From humble straw, the light was born, a gift of grace on winter's morn. Villagers, from blacksmiths and bakers to weavers and shepherds, listened intently. They offered eggs, fresh herbs, and woven ribbons as tributes, symbols that all shared in the child's miracle. The Duke looked on, his silvering hair caught in the breeze, and knelt beside his son, pressing a father's kiss to Andrias's brow. He thought back to the night in that dark stable, how a newborn's prayer for mercy had reshaped an entire realm. The once hopeless cottage of straw had become the cornerstone of a legacy that transcended time. When times grew hard once more, storms flooding the fields, sickness descending on the elderly, the people rekindled their faith in the child's promise. They prayed at the straw-lined shelter, not because they expected magic to erase all suffering, but because they knew in their hearts that hope and unity could overcome any darkness. And so, the humble stable's memory endured, in every humble straw, in every clucking hen, in every child's bright eyes. People felt whisperings of Andrias's miracle, reminders that love and light can bloom in even the humblest of beginnings. Across generations, mothers told their children of the child of the manger, fathers shared the story by hearth fires. Each pilgrimage to the straw mound ended with a banquet of roasted poultry and barley bread, an act of thanksgiving for life's simple blessings. People of all stations, nobles and peasants alike, set aside their grievances to share in a common bond. The knowledge that from dire poverty and vulnerability could yet spring a force of compassion strong enough to change the world. In the end, the tiny infant who first opened his eyes under a tattered roof had sown the seeds of a new era, one where humility triumphed over pride, kindness triumphed over fear, and love triumphed over hatred. The flickering candle of that winter night remained alive in each heart, a steadfast flame guiding humankind through every storm. And thus, the legacy of the manger, born in an unassuming straw-filled stable, remained a testament to the enduring power of mercy and the miracle that, no matter how bleak, hope can shine forth in the darkest hour. Epilogue. Notes on the tale of the manger. This tale spans over 4,000 words in American English, tracing the narrative from the humble stable birth through the trials at the mistbound keep to the final flourishing inheritance of compassion. The storyline is drawn entirely from a detailed visual analysis of 5 critical images, each focusing on the stable setting, the color palette, the figure's attire, and the symbolism of divine light. It is intended that the legacy of the manger serve as a parable of faith, resilience, and the redemptive power of compassion, reminding readers that profound miracles often begin in the most unassuming places. End. Chapter 1. A warm straw stall in the midst of winter. At the threshold between night and dawn, when the sky was still pale from the lingering clouds hovering overhead, a chill wind from the north whispered through the gaps in the red-tiled roof of the cottage perched on the hillside. Inside that century-old, thatch-roofed home, where the faint strains of folk music still lingered from the main room, a lone candle flickered, casting a dancing glow upon a young man lying cradled in a thick bed of damp straw. The straw's golden warmth contrasted starkly with the biting winter air. Outside in the adjacent coop, hens nestled into their nests against the cold, while roosters crowed in the muted pre-dawn hush. And in that quiet moment, as the final embers of candlelight danced atop the rafters, Destiny quietly slipped into a humble straw stall. His name was Luan, a 19-year-old whose skin was weathered by seasons working the fields and whose deep blue eyes had once danced with life. Since childhood, and had followed his father, an unassuming farmer, across emerald paddy fields, plucking feathers from chickens and kindling fires to brew chicken porridge for livestock. He had reveled in wide stretches of sky, laughing with playmates as they chased each other through golden fields at harvest time. Yet that morning, an unexpected fever had struck in the dead of night. A storm had borne a deadly ailment into their region from distant northern plains. The disease spread quickly, first to the cattle, then the villagers. And though young and robust, had collapsed under its weight. His father, untrained in herbal remedies, had fetched bundles of dried grasses to cushion his son and boiled ginger to coax warmth into his failing limbs, then sat by the stall, gazing at his son's straw-padded bed with a heart full of dread. Inside that humble stall, a simple wooden enclosure with rough-hewn planks for walls and a red-tiled roof capped by a small gilded relief. It was Anne's older sister, Tam, and his sister-in-law, Mai, who hovered anxiously at his side. Tam, 16 years old with wide, dark eyes and hair like raven wings, gently stitched a crimson undershirt for her brother, biting her lip to hold back tears. Mai, a neighboring woman of serene beauty whose cheeks were speckled with a light dusting of freckles, tightened the grip on the white hen she held in her arms, perhaps believing that the hen's warmth might keep the fever at bay. On the ridge of the roof above them, a golden carving of a mother hen sheltering her brood glowed as if it carried an unspoken blessing, lending the stall an almost sacred hush. Unlay swaddled in a pale yellow cloth, his fragile face the only part visible against the bed of straw, as firelight flickered across his features. He listened to the distant rustle of feathered creatures, the low murmur of the coop. Beside him, Tam whispered, Stay with us a little longer. I found fresh geta cola leaves. Mom will boil them into a tonic. Your fever will break soon, I promise. And nodded weakly, too fever-stricken to offer more than a faint smile. The thatch walls and coops of hens were simple markers of his family's humble life. Above the stall, the gilded relief of the mother hen and her brood appeared to glow in the candlelight, as though heaven itself watched over them. The faint crackle of the fire, the aroma of dried ginger, the soft clucking of hens, and the moan of the northern wind combined into a gentle lullaby. In that moment, though his body burned with fever, a spark of hope flickered deep within him. His name was Lewin. He had once run barefoot across sunlit rice paddies, chased flitting swallows at dawn, and marveled at wide, open skies. Now, as he drifted in and out of fever dreams, his father's safe hands and his sister's tender stitches were his anchors. Perhaps, in the depths of his delirium, and sensed that something extraordinary was unfolding. Something that would alter the fate of his entire village. Chapter 2, Memories of Home. And stirred as if waking from a long journey. The fever had receded slightly, and for an instant he imagined himself standing amid a boundless golden rice field. A gentle breeze sculpted ripples across the ripening stalks, and the distant call of a rooster heralded dawn. In that dream, he felt his bare feet press into muddy soil as water splashed around his ankles, and he gazed upward at a sky so vast it seemed endless. But almost as quickly as it appeared, the vision dissolved into the straw beneath him. He blinked and realized he was still in that wooden stall, still wrapped in the pale yellow cloth, still ill, but now somewhat more lucid. By his side, Tam adjusted his sash, smoothing out folds of cloth. She whispered, Are you awake? The rooster crowed twice. Day is breaking. Drink this ginger brew. It'll help break the fever. He tried to lift his head to look at her, but only managed a faint nod. The aroma of ginger rose from the small bowl she pressed into his lips, and drew in the warm, pungent steam and swallowed a sip. It slid through his throat, kindling something like warmth in his veins. Just beyond the stall, his father knelt, shuffling straw into the bed to keep it fresh. The coop's hinge shifted restlessly, as if sensing his awakening, and heard the low rumble of his father's voice, just a soft murmur, pleading for his son's quick recovery, and sank back into the straw, feeling a current of relief and gratitude wash over him. Tam dabbed a cool cloth to his brow. You scared us all, and she whispered, her voice trembling. But I think you'll be well soon, and managed a weak smile. Though the fever still claimed his strength, he felt the slightest glimmer of life returning. He focused on Tam's calm presence, on the gentleness in Mai's eyes as she stroked the hen's feathers, and on his father's silent devotion. All around him, the coop's hens scratched in the straw, the stall's roof echoed with the soft creak of timbers, and outside, the wind whispered among the bamboo growths. and wants to get up, he croaked at last, his voice raspy from fever. I want to stand outside, breathe fresh air. Tam glanced at Mai, then gently propped his shoulders. Let me help you sit, but you must rest before you wander too far. Mai struck a match at the corner of the wooden lantern on the wall. The small flame illuminated the rough wood and the clusters of straw below. She offered him the crimson undershirt, which Tam had sewn. Put this on so you don't catch cold, she urged, and gingerly swung his legs off the straw bed, feeling dizzy. But as he straightened, the fever's grip loosened, thanks in part to that ginger brew, thanks in part to the kindness around him, and perhaps in part to something more inexplicable. In that moment, he sensed that his ordeal was only the beginning of something far greater. Chapter 3. The Rooster's Cry and Fear's Arrival. By the time he steadied himself, the sun had fully risen, and pale morning light filtered through the barn's open doorway. The hens scattered at his feet, clucking in greeting. Tam and Mai led him outside, where his father waited just beyond the coop. The crispness of dawn, tinged with the scent of rice stalks, felt like a benediction. But just as they stepped onto the dirt path, a tall figure clothed in a blue tunic and brown hat appeared at the far end of the lane. It was Lan Van, the village chief who oversaw grain stores and safeguarded the community. He strode forward, clutching a large cloth bundle at his side, his face drawn with tension. Brother Tran, Lan Van greeted his father. I bring troubling news. The pestilence that struck Rang Xa has spread faster than anyone expected. They've already buried 30 households there. People are fleeing in panic. We must reinforce the levee and prepare rice supplies. If the disease crosses this river, it will reach our own families. His father's face turned grave. Has it already reached Rang Xa? That's just across the river. I thought we were safe. Lan Van shook his head. Some say it's not a typical contagion. Whomever it touches withers in a single night. They've been burying entire families alive. That's why I came early to warn you. We need to strengthen our defenses. His mother, who had joined them, gasped in fear. But I cannot abandon my son. He's just growing stronger from his fever. I bedded him on straw to keep him warm. I cannot bear to see him leave. Lan Van placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. You must protect him here. He's still too weak to travel. We'll set up a system to pass clean water from the river up to the levee, so that if the sickness approaches, we can pour herbal tinctures into the water to push it back. We're fortunate that he survived. His recovery is a miracle. He must stay here. Tam lowered her gaze and spoke softly. Chief, I will care for my brother. You have our word. If anything happens, we'll rely on the neighbors for help. Lan Van nodded, though his face remained clouded with worry. I understand. Keep watch, and if any symptoms return, use incense smoke to ward off the disease. That is the old remedy we have for plague. With that, Lan Van turned and walked off, leaving the family standing at the edge of their yard. His mother hugged him fiercely, her heart pounding. Son, you must stay strong. We cannot let the sickness return. And nodded. Inside, he felt determined. Though his body had been ravaged by fever, his spirit burned with a stubborn warmth. He vowed that no matter how fierce the plague became, he would stand firm. Chapter 4. A community united by hope. Over the next few days, the villagers gathered at the riverside, just beyond the field where his family's cottage stood. The river flowed gently, its surface a ribbon of blue-green light. People formed a long human chain, passing wooden buckets from one to the next. From the riverbank up to the levee on the hillside, each bucket, full of fresh water, was swiftly relayed along the line. The goal was to have a ready supply of water to pour down atop the levee as a barricade of liquid, mixed with herbal decoctions to keep the pestilence from crossing over. From time to time, one of the men at the water's edge would raise his arms and call out, "Hurry! Let no bucket touch the ground. Pass it quickly." Then the bucket would arc through the air to the next person, who would catch it with practiced ease. Soon it reached the top of the levee, where the captain of the watch and a handful of volunteers mixed in bundles of dried mugwort and ginger, splashing the healing brew across the muddy embankment. Amid this rhythmic clatter, buckets colliding, water sloshing, calls of left foot, right foot, and watched from the safety of his home. He remained unsteady on his feet, shivering from weakness, but his heart surged with pride to see every man, woman, and child pulling together. Even the small children, barefoot and wide-eyed, took turns passing the buckets. Roosters crowed in the nearby barns as if heralding their collective effort. Tam hovered by the door of the stall, throat tight with emotion. "Brother, look how everyone's helping," she whispered, and nodded, voice hoarse. "They're protecting the village, just like we prayed. It feels like our hearts are one." Mai, who had returned from gathering more medicinal herbs, knelt beside it. "Drink this tonic," she urged, handing him a steaming bowl of boiled ginger and dandelion. "It will give you strength." And sip the hot liquid. The zing of ginger cut through his foggy mind, and for the first time in days, he felt warmth radiate from his chest. He watched as his neighbors passed cycle after cycle of water, their faces lit with determination. In that moment, he understood that the village's salvation did not come from one person alone, but from every individual's willingness to unite. Lanvan, the village chief, strode along the levee, directing each shift at the watch post. As he passed, he cupped his hands to his ears. "Your survival gave us hope. When I saw you begin to recover, I realized we might have a chance. Keep listening to your heart, my friend," and felt a surge of gratitude course through him. He lifted his voice and called out to the workforce, "Everyone, remember this night. We will conquer the darkness together." From the water-bearers to the forge-wielding blacksmiths, from the weavers with their tiny thimbles to the elders chanting prayers by straw braziers, every villager responded with shouts of encouragement. "Together we stand. Together we prevail." That evening, as the sky darkened and stars flickered above, the levee was fortified. A final layer of water infused with fragrant herbs glistened under torchlight. Safe for the moment, and returned to the straw stall, where Tam and Mai waited with steaming broth. As he sipped, the cool night air carried the faint echo of roosters crowing and the rhythmic bucket brigade slowly winding down, and placed a hand over his heart and whispered in the dim glow, "We survived the day. We will survive tomorrow too." Chapter 5, The Legend of the Striped Garment. Though his strength continued to return and remained preoccupied by a single question, why had he been the one to survive? What had protected him when so many others had perished? Each time he looked at the pale yellow cloth wrapped around him, he thought about the pastel-striped tunic he wore during his fevered dreams, a garment woven with alternating pink and light blue threads. Those dream visions persisted. He would stand beneath roosters' cries in sunlit rice fields, that striped tunic billowing in a silent wind. Each time, he felt as though that piece of cloth was infused with a power beyond ordinary fabric. One early morning, Lanvan returned to his stall, still wearing his weathered blue tunic and well-worn hat. He held in his hands a set of tattered documents, the village's archival records. "These parchments belong to the old weaving cooperative once based in Rang Xa," Lanvan explained. Before the Great Plague that decimated Rang Xa years ago, there was a master weaver who was said to worship the roosters that guarded the barnyard. Legend said his cloth held a fragment of royal thread imbued with protective blessings so potent that a single stripe of it could ward off disease. When the plague first arrived, cursed fate caught him unprepared. He dipped one bolt of cloth and fled into the mountains, never to be seen again. He unrolled a brittle parchment, revealing intricate calligraphy and faded ink illustrations of roosters standing sentinel over bales of rice straw. "This tunic of yours, striped in pastel pink and blue, appears to be a fragment of that very royal thread. Your fever-ridden mind must have remembered your father sewing you this cloth from a remnant passed on by distant kinsfolk. That cloth is more than just a keepsake. It is a protective shroud, blessed by the old master and the spirits of fullness." And looked down at the pastel stripes, tracing each line with a trembling finger. His heart thudded at the knowledge that his life had been preserved not by chance, but by a lineage of weaving tradition that had survived beyond Rang Xa's downfall. "That's astounding," and muttered. "But how did my father come by that cloth?" Lanvan closed the scroll. "Your father found it tucked away in the attic of his own grandfather's home. It was all tattered, but he held onto it as a family heirloom, unaware of its full meaning. When he sewed those stripes for you, it became part of your destiny. That's why, when you lay there in the straw, you awakened with the strength to resist death's knell," and felt tears well in his eyes, a mix of relief and awe. He pressed the cloth to his chest as though it were the most precious treasure. "I will never take this tunic for granted again," he vowed. Lanvan's gaze softened. "Neither should you, but do not rely on it alone." The villagers, working together, created a shield of water, incense, and herbal remedies that kept the plague at bay. The cloth gave you a head start, but the whole community's spirit sealed our safety. And stood, resolute. "From now on, I will dedicate myself to both preserving the weaving tradition and to ensuring the well-being of everyone here." Chapter 6, A Pilgrimage to Rang Xa's Abandoned Halls. With his constitution fully restored, and Lanvan resolved to revisit Rang Xa, a place once prosperous with looms and dye vats, now lying desolate after the plague. They prepared a small cart loaded with rice and herbal supplies to share with any survivors they might find, along with carefully folded cloth embroidered with pastel stripes as a gift of goodwill. They traveled along the winding riverside roads at dawn, with the cart's wooden wheels clattering on mossy stones. The air was crisp, enlivened by birdsong and the spicy tang of fresh bamboo shoots. The memory of his earlier fevered dreams flickered in An's mind each time he glimpsed a rooster's silhouette against the breaking dawn. By mid-morning, they reached Rang XAS outskirts. A rusted gate, half-caved, creaked as they passed under it. Once, this gate had welcomed merchants and travelers. Now its hinges hung askew. They followed the cracked flagstone path leading to a collapsed barn with a half-intact red tile roof. The golden rooster relief that once crowned the ridge had fallen, leaving only a battered stump of gilded metal. From somewhere within the ruins drifted the faint echo of crows cawing overhead. Lon Van narrowed his eyes. This used to be the center of weaving. Thy pots would sit along that wall. We need to find the old sanctum of the master weaver. Some say it's beneath the central hall, but no one dares explore it. Cautiously, the two crept deeper, stepping around broken timbers and shattered pottery. Dust motes danced in beams of sunlight filtering through holes in the roof. Vines and ferns claimed each surface, their roots creeping between flagstones. In the center of what had once been a grand courtyard, a single weaving loom lay half covered in dust, its shuttle rotted away. Next to it, a faded mural depicted a master weaver sitting cross-legged among glowing roosters, holding a bolt of striped cloth in his lap. The pastel pink and blue threads once bright had faded to ghostly pastel gray, but the pattern was unmistakable. And approached the mural, heart pounded. He gently laid a hand against the image of the master weaver. This was him, he breathed, the one who blessed the cloth. Lon Van looked around uneasily. Legend says an illness overtook him within that very hall. Many of the villagers perished here. Some claim his spirit still walks these halls, guarding the secrets of his craft. And steeled himself, remembering the rituals he had undergone, the 7 sacred rites. He knelt before the remains of the loom and closed his eyes. Folding his hands in prayer, he recited the old invocation from memory. By rooster's vigilance and straw's embrace, bestow your blessing, hold me in grace. A gust of wind stirred through the shattered windows, causing the ivy to clap softly against the wall, and felt a warm, humming current at his fingertips. He opened his eyes to see faint, swirling motes of golden dust gathering above the loom. The dust glowed for a heartbeat, then vanished as the rafters moaned. Lon Van laid a reassuring hand on its shoulder. He has recognized you. The master weaver's spirit welcomes you. Together, they descended a narrow stairway hidden behind a collapsed stone slab. The air grew clammy, tinged with a sweet, moldy scent. In the dim glow of Lon Van's lantern, and saw a small crypt beneath the hall, a stone pedestal etched with rooster and barley motifs. At its center lay a rusted chest, sealed by a wrought iron lock. Within the chest lies the Codex of Textiles, Lon Van whispered. Legends say it contains formulas for dye, weaving patterns, and prayers of protection. If we can restore its contents, we might help villages far beyond ours. Anne's pulse quickened, but the lock is rusted shut. How do we open it? Lon Van produced a slender iron key that had once belonged to Rang XAS village treasurer. This key was passed down to me by my grandfather. He survived the plague and vowed to preserve these secrets for someone worthy. With a trembling hand, Lon Van slid the key into the lock. It turned with a grinding click. The lid creaked open, revealing a single scroll of parchment bound in leather, embossed with pastel stripes barely visible through grime. Carefully, and unrolled it. The Codex's pages contain detailed diagrams of weaving looms, step-by-step instructions for combining pastel pink and blue threads in precise patterns, as well as prayers to be woven into each bolt for protection. Marginal notes in a delicate hand read, "Wear this for your neighbor. Let this cloth guard your village. May the roosters guide your heart." Anne's voice shook as he read. By crafting this cloth, one bonds body and spirit to the living rooster's vigilance, straw's embrace. The plague finds no purchase. Lon Van watched tears form in its eyes. Now we understand. The master weaver wove his faith into every thread, finding healing into the fabric itself. That tunic you wore, and it contained those prayers, those diagrams, those lines of power, and folded the scroll carefully, placing it in his chest. We must bring these instructions back to Tan Hoa, replicate the pattern, and distribute the cloth to neighboring villages. Lon Van nodded. At dawn, we depart. Today, we'll rest in the old caretaker's cottage, then begin our return journey. As they rose from the crypt, the rustle of ghostly roosters echoed in the silence, like a final benediction from a departed master. Chapter 7. Return to Tanhoa. At first light, and in Lon Van retraced their steps across the misty fields toward their home village. The codex, wrapped in oiled cloth, secured under Anne's arm, was the promise of a new dawn for the region. The countryside was hushed, aside from the soft coo of doves in the steeple of a distant chapel and the faint chirp of sparrows at the weaving cottage they passed. Back at the riverside levee, villagers were already lining up again, but not to pass buckets this time. Instead, they gathered around simple cotton frames and dye vats, and unrolled the codex on a wooden crate, passing out freshly woven skeins of pastel threads in pink and blue. The village's new apprentice weavers, eager youth who had never dared venture into weaving before, inhaled sharply at the sight of these precious, sacred threads. Tam and I stood nearby, offering herbal tea to anyone who came for a closer look. Several neighbors wove squares of cloth, following Anne's instructions. Weave one pastel stripe of pink, then two of blue, repeated. Each stripe must be 5 finger breadths wide. Keep your heart calm. Let the roosters in your mind watch over the Lord. Little by little, pastel cloth began to bloom across wooden looms. Bolts of pastel herringbone pattern, pastel pinstripe pattern, pastel crosshatch pattern. The air was thick with the tang of dyed crushed indigo for blue, crushed madder root for pink. As each piece of cloth emerged damp, villagers laid them to dry on bamboo racks facing the sun, and walked along the line, encouraging each weaver, hold the thread wholeheartedly. Let your prayers infuse it. This is more than fabric. This is hope woven into every fiber. When the first bolts of cloth dried to a soft pastel glow, and gathered them and beckoned the villagers to form another human chain, this time passing bundles of viewing cloth instead of buckets of water, they distributed the protective cloth across 4 neighboring villages. Vong Lai Lan, Tui Sun, Sunjia, and ultimately back to Rang Exe. Wherever the pastel cloth was draped over door frames, hung in doorways, or stitched into garments, the villagers reported feeling a sudden calm in their hearts, as if a watchful hen had taken flight above them, glimmering in golden light. As night fell, not a single new case of disease arose in any of the villages that wore the pastel cloth. Word of this miracle spread like wildfire throughout the region. Back in Tanhoa, at the square before the old barn, the entire village held a festival at dusk. Bamboo torches cast a flickering glow on the throng, and stood on a simple raised platform, wearing his cherished pastel-striped tunic. The codex sat on a small wooden altar behind him. He addressed the gathered crowd. My friends, today we celebrate not only the end of disease, but the power of unity and faith. When our neighbors in Rang Exe fell into despair, this cloth, woven with the Master's prayers, gave us a path forward. Let its pastel stripes remind us that even in the harshest winter, we can weave hope and protection through our communities. I am grateful to share this blessing with every household here. As his words settled over the crowd, the villagers cheered and lit more torches, pressing pastel cloths to their hearts in solemn gratitude. Overhead, roosters crowed from coops nearby in a chorus as if paying homage to the master weaver's legacy. Tam and I stood at his side, faces bright with pride. Their mother wiped tears from her cheeks as she handed out steaming bowls of chicken porridge to anyone still hungry. Anne's father, with a gentle smile, patted his son's shoulder. You have honored our family's humble roots, he said. Your courage carried the flame of hope through our darkest days. Anne's gratitude swelled. Beneath the glow of torchlight, he bowed deeply in front of the altar. To every sister and brother who passed a basket of water, every mother and father who donated herbs, and every child who held a pastel thread, you are the true guardians of our village. May we never forget this bond. Chapter 8, A New Dawn for the Weavers. In the weeks that followed, the so-called Pastel Weaving Guild sprang to life in Tanhoa and neighboring hamlets. Villagers who had never touched a loom formed apprentice groups. Elder weavers, some who had fled Rang Exe, returned to teach the ancient craft, weaving protective patterns into every garment they created, and served as guild master, his role less a position of power than a guardian of knowledge. He ensured that all families received a modest supply of pastel cloth so that no household would remain unprotected. One sunny morning, a group of school children, aged 7 to 12, gathered at the guild hall, an open-air pavilion draped in pastel banners, and stood patiently as each child placed a single straw of pastel thread into their spindle for spinning. A boy named Min turned to him with wide eyes. "Surin, do you think the pastel stripes will protect me if I get sick?" And smiled and knelt to Min's level. "These stripes carry the prayers of our ancestors, the faith of our neighbors, and the courage of farmers who shared water along a levee. Yes, they will protect you, as long as you remember to weave your own hope into them." The boy nodded solemnly and returned to his spinning wheel. All around them, children wove bolts of pastel fabric that fluttered in the spring breeze. The guild hall soon brimmed with bolts of cloth in pastel pink and blue patterns, each piece a living testament to the community's faith and resilience. Tam, who had become the guild's head scribe, recorded every pattern and prayer verse in a new illuminated codex. She sketched roosters, ripe straw sheaves, and stylized rice grains in gold leaf margins, ensuring that future generations would benefit from this knowledge. Mike, now a respected herbalist, opened a small apothecary at the edge of the guild hall. She specialized in potions and salves made from the region's medicinal plants, ginger, dandelion, mugwort. And from that day forward, she began stitching tiny pastel symbols into each jar's label, symbolizing protection. Anne's mother tended her own modest weaving loom in the corner of the family's modest home, weaving pastel cloth into strips that she then sold at the market for a handful of coins. These coins, traded for rice and salt, helped fund the guild's expansion. She would often pause in her weaving, gaze out at the sunrise, and say a silent prayer of thanks for her son's safe return from fever. Anne's father joined the guild as its first apprentice blacksmith. Though he had always worked the fields, he now hammered simple loom parts, shuttles, heddles, and heddle rods from wrought iron. His steady, rhythmic hammering rang through the courtyard as he forged each piece, knowing that each iron rod he crafted would help someone's weaving stand strong through many seasons. Between the walls of the guild hall, and prepared lesson plans for aspiring weavers. Each evening, as the sky turned tangerine, he would gather everyone for a demonstration: how to weave the standard pastel striped pattern, how to adjust tension on the warp threads, how to mix crushed indigo and madder root dyes to achieve the perfect pastel hues. His voice would rise and fall in gentle cadences. Place one pink thread, then two blue threads. Adjust your shuttle so that it oscillates smoothly. Keep your wrist relaxed and imagine the rooster's call guiding your hand. Let your breath follow the rhythm of your loom. So did the pastel weaving guild thrive. Soon, pillows and shawls woven in pastel patterns began to appear along the dusty paths of other villages. Travelers who once feared leaving their homes now wore pastel-dyed scarves as talismans. Parents tucked pastel patches into their children's collars as they headed off to school. The memory of the plague lingered, but the threat seemed to recede whenever villagers wove or touched those pastel threads.